How does someone really know they're a writer? Maybe they just like the idea of being a writer, the
Yes.
identity of it?
No, it's a good question, as always. I've found with actors as well, people who I've come in contact with, that some people like to play the role and others like to actually do the work. And so there's you can see, because when it starts getting difficult, those who want to play the role go, this is hard. And then it becomes like, well, do you really want to do this? And writers, I always say writers write. Writers are a special breed. You know what I mean? I know if it's hard to explain, but you're the one up at 2 o'clock in the morning with passion, and you can't, to use a double negative, not write. It's something that's in your blood, it's in your DNA to be a creative person like that. So those people, I say I used to work in a restaurant as a waiter, and there were some people who wanted to be actors and writers as well. And, I'm working on the thing, and they never finish something. That's also another indication where you can't see it through. Where this person who writes, there's a lot of fear involved because it may be crap. You may not be at a level where you want to be, but you have to get through that to get to the other side, to master anything, martial arts, whatever it is that you're studying. So a lot of the people wanted to be actors. Liked the, I'm brooding, blah, 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 I'm an actor, wearing the leather jacket. Blah, blah. And you said, well, you're going on auditions? Well, no. Are you taking classes? Well, no. I have a good look. Okay, that'll get only so far. You know what I mean? So I think some people may try writing, like say, I think I'd like to write a screenplay, which is fantastic. It might not be the, maybe novel writing is better suited, or maybe both of them are not. It takes a big commitment. So I think you find your way. But for me, since I was 11, I knew that this was kind of my calling, making movies and things. When we were shooting films, short movies at 11 years old, I knew, because nothing would stray me from that. So I think I think you either find out that it's not what you really are passionate about, or early on it's your passion, and nothing's going to stop you from it. So I think that's what designates a writer for the long haul.
And the test of when things are uncomfortable and looks like it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I always say failure is a test to see how badly you want it. And this life of a writer is filled with rejection, failure, and criticism. And it's not going to go away even when you start working. In fact, the stakes, I think, are even higher, because then there's money involved and contracts and pressure, like I have to work under a deadline. And that was the first thing that was difficult for me when I started working professionally, is that you're supposed to be creative under a deadline. And how can you do that? And when you're working on your specs, it's open-ended, right? I won't work today, or I'll go to the beach. And when it becomes your job, it's a job with any responsibility like a job has to do. You clock in, and your clock in time might be 3 in the afternoon, as long as you get those pages done, at a certain time. So
How did you learn to write screenplays?
Oof. I don't know if I still know. How did I learn how to write screenplays? Well, early on as a kid, when I was making films with my friend, we wrote on pen and paper, and just made a couple of notes, and really didn't know what we were kind of doing, but we knew we had to have something on paper. And I'm not sure if we actually read a screenplay per se or not, because a lot of times scripts in those days were hard to find. You couldn't just say, I'm going to look up on the internet, blah, blah, blah. Unless you were working in the business, you're not going to find a screenplay unless you have someone in the business. So we started with pen and paper, and then eventually realized, moving into high school, let's say, because that was when we were 11 years old, and in middle school realized that we had to have some sort of, you can't just shoot the movie and make it up as you go. And so we started writing screenplays. And after we sort of veered off on our separate paths, my friend making his own, we had our own camps of actors and, a stable of people. I remember in high school actually physically writing, typing, my script. It was like 60 pages. Now it was a short, but it wasn't a feature either. So it was kind of this weird nebulous place, but it was, you know, exterior, blah, blah, blah. And of course, then before college is when the real studying began, you know, with books and then learning how to like write a conventional screenplay as you would think. But yeah, basically it was winging it at the beginning and then moving into sort of like, well, I should probably study, you know, if I'm going to want to work someday. And then college was definitely, you know, film school was definitely the study of the screenplay.
Were there any books you picked up before you entered the first semester of college?
Yeah, Sid Field's book, which is a famous one. I have an autographed copy.
Oh, nice.
And of course, Joseph Campbell, and I don't remember the other ones, but the ones that you would think. And then it was just getting on to writing, you know, and also seeing screenplays. And in classes, we would be given scripts as well. There was more access to that. And our teachers were always industry professionals. So that helped as well for them to sort of, you know, train us and keep us in the you know, guide us along into the way of how, this is how a script's written, at least, you know, in Hollywood per se.
Would you, as a class, go through it? Like, you know, there'd be 50 copies passed out and then you'd read it. Like, how did they
Yeah, there was
dissect the
one
script?
class that we each got a copy of the script. And it would be a movie that I think was going to be made, and the teacher was going to make the film. So we got to see how a movie was broken down, and it's, you know what I mean? So we could see that from a writer's perspective, like, oh, it has to be broken into days, and, you know, it's not filmed in order, and all these things that, you know, sometimes writers who are just starting out don't think about, you know, that a movie has to be broken down into how many days. You can't have too many scenes for a particular budget because how many scenes are you going to shoot per day, you know, these type of things. So yeah, it was a great study in the actual, you know, being a savvy production writer, which I think is important as well.
And did they ever make the movie? Did that teacher
Oh,
ever
geez,
make
I
it?
don't remember.
Oh, okay.
Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure.
Just wondering if you got to see the
No, I
finished product.
didn't. No, it was probably proposed and probably couldn't get the financing, you know.
Right.
So, yeah.
Would the students give feedback? Would they become their own sort of like note givers, or was it simply just a read along?
Yeah, I don't think he was interested in feedback.
Sounds like a writer. Okay.
Yeah, writer, producer, director.
Yeah,
So
there you
yeah,
go.
I don't think he was like, I don't care. You're supposed to listen to me, not the other way around. You know?
I wasn't sure if that was how, the class was.
Yeah. Well, other classes that we wrote screenplays in our own, you know, we'd get feedback on our own scripts, you know, from our collective class, which was small, luckily. I think one class we had 8 people. So it wasn't like, you know, like a film studies class where you have 300 people. So, and then, you know, we'd each give notes, and the teacher would give notes, and, you know, at the end of the semester, we have a finished script. So that's really in film school when I started to, you know, write feature-length screenplays, per se.
How long did it take you to write where you felt you were writing at a professional level?
Probably 5 feature-length screenplays, because it was my 5th spec that actually was optioned and sold. So I'm like, well, I must be doing something right.
Sure.
You know, but it took about, in the ones before were kind of bumbling, and there was, you know, it wasn't obviously quite up to par to compete. Those are the ones I always see you have to get out of your system. You know, the first 2 or 3, and many times writers write their first script and they're like, where's my agent? You know, this is their first script of their first draft, you know, and say, this is brilliant. And you're like, well, the first of anything is not going to be, unless you're a genius, which you very well may be, but most of the time there's so many things so many moving parts, you know, that it's hard even at best to get it like, wow, this is, you know, 100% there. So it takes time. And so about the 5th one, you know, it was about, okay, I think I've got this under control, you know, and then from that also, that was a learning experience to work with producers, because it's one thing to write your script, it's another to, now it's real, you know, where you don't live in your bubble and you're like, everything's exactly the way I want. And you're like, well, now it's being taken away from me, and I have to compromise and make changes, and there's budgets and all sorts of things, and you stick to the creative aspects of it because you wrote it, but you have to realize that filmmaking is a collaborative, art form, and there's other people involved. Starts with the script, but a script is just a script. It's words on paper. It has to be elevated to actors and someone to direct it, and So I think it was my fifth spec.
And so not just the fact that you were being hired to do something, but was it also the ease or the comfort in your own skin of like, okay, I'm working with other people and they may not like this and I'm going to get feedback and I'm going to be okay with that, or what? Was there like something that also shifted? Not just the fact that you got these jobs, which is huge, but I mean, did you also feel like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'm doing this?
Yeah, but even now, to a certain extent, there's still that, with artists, I don't think it ever goes away, especially writers, where this voice is going, oh my gosh, this is the one that they find out you're a fraud. You actually were able to fool them, 16 times, and now is the one where they catch you, But it's a constant learning experience. And I always say I get butterflies before every job because I respect it such and I don't take it for granted.
Sure.
Like, oh, this will be a walk in the park, or I know how to do this. I do, but every time out is different. Every script's different, every producer's different, so it's not going to be the same as last time. So you can't say, well, this last one, and some are easy, and some are just the worst thing ever. I mean, I'm not saying the worst thing ever, but some are very difficult, and you just wonder, like, wow, how is it this one is so much more difficult than the last that was a breeze? And you don't know. I mean, it's just a weird combination of elements, and it's so. But it's better, yes, absolutely. After I'm working on my 40th screenplay, so but I still, like I say, bow down to the craft and respect it because I learn something every time that I didn't know before. And I should be open to that. I think writers should be. Should be never, you get to a plateau and you're like, I know everything. A master martial artist is not only living it, but also continuing to learn. So it's like that kind of, I keep using martial arts because I'm studying right now a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's helpful in the writing aspect, philosophy of almost the same thing. Because, the first moves are like, well, that's not it. You have to do this. Now the pressure has to be on that foot. And but if you just keep at it, and be open to learning,
And with martial arts, would you say it's 50% physical, 50% mental?
I think, well, I'm not deep into it. I've been interested for many years, but a lot of it is mental. And the physicality is you can be a small person and still ward off an attack because of what you know. You know what I mean? It's using force against your own, you know what I mean? It's like you don't have to be a Herculean person to defend yourself, but it's not about defense, I'm just saying. But writing, it's a discipline. And I think it should be followed as such, and it's a lifelong learning process. So, like I say, even after so many scripts, some are terrible, some are the best I've ever written, and I keep striving to have the next one be better than the last one. And there are a lot of factors when you actually have a movie that's filmed, it's out of your control. You write the script, but you're not there directing it, you're not there producing it. There's a lot of choices that can fall short from what your vision of it becomes. So at that point, you have to step back and just go, well, on to the next one, And it doesn't mean you don't care, but you can't care so much that every time you're just destroyed, and that's why I say about detachment is so important over the long haul, because it doesn't mean you don't care. And believe me, still, I'm making changes now in a script, and I'm just like, I care, but I have to get this thing through the conveyor belt, into production. So, it's a lot less stressful for you over the long haul to care, but just sort of don't hang on too tightly, So that's just my personal experience.
Do you think, going back to the analogy of martial arts, that writing is similar, 50%? I wouldn't want to say physical, but the act of writing and then the other 50% is like this mental thing of showing up every day, not putting it off, not
Sure.
going to the beach, and not letting the little voice say, this is horrible, I'm not going to finish this.
Yes, and a lot of it is feel too. Writing is not just mechanical. There's feel, like you're sculpting. I think like with clay. You're writing a scene, but your technique is through a laptop or whatever you write on, and it's coming out here onto the page. And so with that, it's a combination of all things, mental, physical, but also it's amazing because once when you feel and you get a move right, and you don't have to think about it, it's like. But I said, how would this person ever study for so many years and do all these different things? Because it just, same way with screenwriting, how could you study and know all these different things? Because you just keep doing it again and again and again, And that's back to your earlier comment about who's a writer and who's not. If you're a writer, you write, you don't talk about it. Hemingway had a quote about that. Writers don't talk about their stuff, they're too busy working. And what I mean about that is like, oh, I'm doing my pages and this and that, which is fine, but you better be doing the pages you're talking about. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's just, you're doing more talking about your work than actually doing the work. And it's always about the work. So we can talk about our work, but if there is no work that's real, and I'm not saying you have to sell something either. Writers who write, you're absolutely a writer. But if you find that it's not for you, that's okay too. Because I see people come up against that wall all the time and they're fighting desperately. It's like, you let go. It's okay to let go. If it's not right for you, why do you want to try to force it? Because it's an up and down journey to be a writer, So that's why I would say you have to really love it more than anything else, because it's going to break your heart, and it's going to be the best thing you've ever experienced in your life at the same time.
What makes the first draft of a screenplay crucial to a writer's success?
I'm glad you asked. Because there's a lot of theories going around that the first draft can be crap, and it has to be. And I don't believe that it has to be crap, absolutely not. And Ernest Lehman, who the great six-time nominated Academy Award, six-time nominated screenwriter, who did West Side Story, North by Northwest, Sweet Smell of Success, he said the first draft is dangerously important because it's difficult. Now, this next part is paraphrasing. To totally change something into another direction once you've had it down, and it is difficult. It's like building a house and then having the walls don't quite have the right structure and the windows, you have to go back in, and now you're dismantling things to try to rewrite it. And everybody has their own way of working, which is fantastic, whatever's best for you. But I always think, why would you waste the time that it takes to write a first draft and know that it's not going to be good, and know that 60, 70% of it is going to be thrown out or rearranged or maybe not even used, to get a kernel of something that can be used. And I always say, by the way, when you start working, which is the intent, I suppose, of screenwriters, is to work, meaning they're being hired to write scripts that go in, produced into movies, is that you can't turn in a crappy first draft. You'll be fired. So on assignment jobs, my first draft has to be really pretty good to work with. It can't be like, well, that was a nice pass, now we're behind in development, sort of. And so I've trained myself over the years to really, and had to, have the first draft be really solid because the outline was really solid. And that's another discussion about outlines. And also people are, well, I just wing it. I sit down and I write a script, and then you get lost in page 40 and you can't really see the rest of where you're going, and so it becomes a muddled mess. And it's like, what, and I know it sounds that it's like some kind of formula, like, well, just do this, this, and this. But sort of when you start writing professionally, there are steps. That's how you're paid too. It's steps. So we turn in the first draft, and then we have notes, and then we execute the second, and we move on and on. So yes, the first draft, I believe, is really important. And it doesn't have to be perfect. There shouldn't be any pressure like, I can't write it because I know it's bad. But if you've already done like really the heavy lifting in the outline, then the first draft should kind of be a breeze, because you've already kind of, in a way, seen the film, worked it out before you've ever gone to pages, pages of the actual screenplay. And I have found that every time, because the more time you work on the outline, the more details, and again, now people are going to say, it stifles my creativity. There's no room. There's complete room for freedom and creativity, but you have a safety net. You're not falling off that high wire and dropping down the canyon into the river below. You're going boom, you've got the net that captures you. And so many things come out while I'm writing the script that I never thought of in the outline, because I'm in that world and I have that room to play and go this way, but I know what's coming next because I've already thought of it, kind of thing. So the first draft, I think, is really important.
Just to play devil's advocate, what if I say, well, I'm already hesitant as a writer, I already don't believe in my ability, so if I do a, quote, vomit draft, that helps me sit down and realize, okay, wait, maybe this isn't that bad. And if I couldn't do that vomit draft, then I wouldn't write.
Okay. To me, it's kind of like rolling the dice, I suppose. I don't know.
Okay. All right, so that's the
I like
biggest...
vomiting. I don't like vomiting. I don't know.
Okay.
I get it. I understand. But my point, again, I hammer back, there's no vomit draft when you start working. I haven't experienced it. Maybe some people have. They'll get pages, I'll see you in a month. Do whatever you want to do. The investors don't care. The network has no idea what you're doing because it's just, So as I say, writing specs, I believe, is a training ground, right? Because that's how you learn to write. Bad spec after bad spec then becomes a good spec. And next time you learn from this, in the notes and how to execute notes. That's how you start learning how to write screenplays. Because you write bad spec, you learn from your mistakes, you get notes, you take the blows, and you come back stronger next time, what not to do, and you become a more efficient screenwriter rather than wasting time. You're not going to be able to waste time when you're working professionally. You're going to be under a contract. And I know I'm coming at it from that angle, but it's the only angle I can come from because that's my experience as of the last 20 years. So I do remember when I was writing the specs in college, and I still write specs, but it's different because they're on my own time, and there's no pressure there. But if you've never sold anything, again, I guess we could have the argument with, but I'm just saying, I think it's great to train yourself now to sort of be more structured if you're a writer who wants to work in the Hollywood system. Hollywood system meaning a producer hires you to write a screenplay, or they hire you to buy your screenplay. You're going to have to do rewrites on it and things like that.
So if you hired an architect and they give you this vomit draft of the blueprints, it probably is not going to fly. And you
Not
probably
really. And the
probably won't
architect
get
might go, hey, look at my other homes, and that's not the way I work, man. I like to just wing it. And you're like, why is the window facing up? I don't understand, what are we looking at? So I think and I know people just have to, I wish I could just vomit a script out, where it's like soup to nuts, it's all done, it's perfect. But that vomiting can be done in the outline, where you're like, wow, making those mistakes there before you ever go to the screenplay. And then, like I said, the screenplay should be a pleasurable experience. It should be like, and today I did 5 more pages. You know what? Because I know what I'm doing. I've lived with the characters. I'm not first seeing them on this blank page of the screenplay. I've lived with them in the outline. I know what's going to happen. I know the intent of this scene. And stuff, again, always comes out. Brilliant stuff that you go, that would be great, because you're living in that world. You're not suddenly trying to make it up as you go. You can do that in the outline. Nobody's going to see the outline. I mean, eventually they will see it, but what I'm saying is that's like the pre-blueprint. The pre-screenplay is the outline. And the more time you spend on that story, the easier the script's going to be to write, and you're going to more about it. You're going to see the story in your head. And to continue that, not every time that the outline's accepted and you go to script, let's say, are they going to like the script either? And that happens too all the time. Happens recently where it's like, yeah, but didn't we agree to the outline? But when they see the finished product, this part doesn't work. They thought it did. And so, it's like if the house was built and then you go, well, in the blueprints, I kind of liked that, but now I don't. So that happens too. You have to be prepared for that. And other times I've done a script where they're like, we hardly have any notes. You're like, oh my gosh, that's never happened. I think because of the solid outline.
What makes a great story?
I think what makes a great story is something that someone can watch and have an emotional response to, and perhaps learn something from or be uplifted by, and you can really see that the person creating the film or whatever is really passionate about their point of view or their voice, and also something that you personally, if you were going to write that story, are passionate about as well. Great stories, as you can see with films, stand the test of time. So there's a reason why we go back and we keep seeing these movies over and over again that in the pantheon of cinema, that why do they touch us? And, from people around the world, because it's like a universal theme, good versus evil, it's a basic one, but it's something that transcends countries. It finds the essence of the human condition. So, and that's, I don't want to say hard to find, but you find it and you try to stick that, interject, into what stories you want to tell as a writer or a filmmaker.
I mean, I know you have your outline, but
Sure.
At what point are you really honing in on that dialogue?
When I'm doing the outline, I'm not, if I have a line that comes up, I'll throw it in just for my own sake, so I remember it. But I'm running those scenes in my head, about what people are going to say, and the characters, and when this is the first time you're going to sit down and craft the scene. So you two have never been together, and I have to write it. And if I stay in that character's voice in my head, for the most part, it'll continue through. But then you do another pass and redefine it and say, man, they really wouldn't say that, and this and that. So first draft is good for that, is to being with your characters and sort of sussing out the first time. And it may not be perfect, it won't be, about their voice, because you got to find it, you got to get a handle on that for the different characters. It helps, like when you do your character profiles, if you decide to sit down like an actor would and really suss it out, to think of how this character speaks, what their point of view is, things like that. Because many times I do read scripts and you could take the names off from characters and they kind of sound like the same person. And that's not what you don't want. It should be like you take the names off and I go, I knew who that is. Oh, I know who this is. It has to be that distinct, because otherwise it just all blends into people just saying things, and people don't speak the same way,
And at what point do you thin out the dialogue, or maybe you don't need to, in that you start to read it and go, this just sounds too, like people wouldn't really say this. Let me thin this out, have it be more monosyllabic.
The second draft.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or usually gets the notes about cut this speech, or, cut the first line out, you're saying the same thing. And that's, it's, second draft should be more, redefining, not like throw that out. Let's, and I've worked on scripts like that, as a script doctor, where it's like, this is completely, see everything that you're reading here? Yeah. You can't use it. Oh, gives you the title, the character names, everything's got to recalibrate, rewritten. So second draft is great for going through that and polishing up, and then, you put it away for a week and you come back to it and it really is glaring, like, did I write that? It bumps for me. This character doesn't sound like, and many times people find it's good to speak the dialogue aloud, or have table reads where they can hear it, like they do with plays, it's like, that doesn't quite sound like that character. And then an actor is a good is a good person for that, to really, read it and go, this kind of doesn't, you know what I mean? Even like in a reading, an actor would take the character in and go, this doesn't sound right. Oh, okay. If you're workshopping it, type of thing.
Right. If someone can't get a bunch of actors together for whatever reason, would it be helpful maybe to speak into a tape recorder, their iPhone?
Oh, sure. And the software has, you can put it will read the script for you and you can listen. So, but the voice is okay, But yeah, it'd be good. I speak, the dialogue, people probably, what's that guy talking to himself, Like, oh, I'm crazy. I decided to be a writer,
At least people leave you alone on the street.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I'm writing constantly in my head,
How do you know you're getting the dialogue right?
Again, a feel, personally for me, it's a feel and sound, and vision about you have to really know your characters to write each one individually and what they would say and more importantly, what they would not. A lot of time dialogue is written and I see a scene and I'm like, this character doesn't have to say that line. Let them emote, with, 60 feet on the screen with a look rather than, you want to err on action first and dialogue second, so dialogue's extremely important, but that shouldn't drive it shouldn't drive the narrative by people speaking, because most of the time people don't say what they mean, so a lot of times it's going to be like the subtext below that about what they really mean, And dialogues, it's hard to do well. You read things and like I said, you've got characters that all sound the same. And it's just sort of like it sits there on the page and it's not, I could strip the name off and I would go, they both sound like the same person. So it takes time and like we discussed earlier about maybe, tape it, with your phone or something and listen back. And if it doesn't sound, this is the thing about sound, the way people talk, their diction, what they would say and what they wouldn't say, what they would reveal and not,
The tone.
The tone.
Sure.
Exactly.
Because you could say one thing and it would sound completely friendly and kind,
Sure.
and another, and it's just a matter of tone.
And then when you start working with actors, that's like the workshop level, because they'll take your piece and go, okay, and then internalize it and then go, this doesn't, because I've seen it on sets where the actor's like, this doesn't work for me. I need to change this. And it's like, okay, as long as it's not too changed, because, you take that line out earlier, we're not talking about a big rewrite, but, internalizing it and saying, because now I know my character wouldn't really say that. And you go, okay, that's fair, In writing it, I thought it would, and now on the set, it doesn't work, so there's that thing. So it's constant evolving, entity is the screenplay, because you're shooting it for the first time, and it's creative process. There's choices made on the set all the time.
In what ways does a screenwriter disrespect format?
By not learning format, pretty much. I know many people say format, who cares? And there's no rule book. There's a accepted way that scripts are written, of course. And so people who read scripts a lot are going to expect a script to be written that way. Exterior, with the location header, followed by description, followed by dialogue. And there are particular ways of doing that, but it's not writing the script in crayon. It's, and importantly enough, what I always see is if something's not clear. And so when you read a script and the style isn't clear, or I'm like, was that character in the car? I don't, it's confusing. That's going to kill you, because a reader's going to get your script and they're going to scan it. They're going to, they're not going to read word for word, they're going to scan the script. They have a lot of scripts to read, readers. And if it keeps bumping that way and it gets confusing and you have to go back and turn the page back and say, I didn't quite, it's not going to reflect well upon you as a writer or the project. And sometimes people say, well, they'll see through, all that stuff to my genius of how the idea is. There's a lot of great screenplays out there. So there's no need to weed through, a bunch of mess to try to find the genius idea in there. It's all about the execution of that idea. So format's extremely important because also it shows if the script that I'm reading, I could look at the title page and then I flip to page 1, just one page, and I can see, okay, maybe this person is a professional writer and maybe they're not, but format will give you away every time because of what you don't know. And so if it doesn't look like a script, it's going to be hard to get through it and understand the nature of how a script is written, to read it. And that's the thing. I want to read the script and be able to see it and understand. And format is what does that.
So people maybe mistake novel writing, the same format with
A bit, yeah. Mm-hmm. There's also two camps about that where, it doesn't matter. I want to write what's in the character's head, and the other camp is you can only write what you can see or hear on the screen, period. And you can deviate, but when you start to read scripts that read like a novel, he walked to the window and stared out, thinking about his girlfriend back when he was 12. How do you show that? You're telling me that. If you show that where he picks up a picture and he sees his girlfriend at 12, or I say it in dialogue, those are two ways to do it cinematically. But the other way is just telling us, and for a director to read that, an actor might go, okay, that's what I'll think about, but how am I going to show that? So there's two camps vying for that, and I tend to err on you can only write what you can show. So.
How do you keep the audience engaged in the script?
You keep them engaged by making them work. They're an observer of the movie, and you're leading them along the path. But like Billy Wilder said, you give an audience, you allow an audience to add up 2 + 2 = 4. They're going to love you forever, right? So we want to watch a movie, but we also want to, setups, payoffs. I had this discussion recently with another writer who goes, well, I don't write a lot of those, setups and stuff like the commercial movies you write. And I was like, okay. But setups, we love that, because in Act 1, when we set up this thing, it saves in Act 2 and we go, I wondered why they showed the keys in the thing. Right, everything's for a reason. Nothing in there is left to chance, you know what I mean? So you keep an audience engaged by interesting characters too,
Interesting. So a setup is a little clue.
Yeah, setups. And then sometimes the setup is not paid off. There's films that many times, maybe like in a noir or something, you thought was gonna, and it doesn't, you're like, that's okay. But when you have little setups that later on, oh my gosh, that's why he left the knife in the thing, because he thought, and so when you get that, you're active in your mind, not just passive watching a movie go by. It becomes more interesting, I don't know, just.
So clues, but some of them can be false?
Sure.
To keep the viewer on their toes?
And twists and turns are extremely important. We don't want to just go, the minute you bring us along and think we're going one way, we zag on another. That's going to keep my interest. Wow, yeah. Where it's not just, I've seen this before. What's going to happen? The killer's going to be behind the door with the thing, and then when that doesn't happen, you're like, oh, it didn't have, wow. It's different, it's refreshing, rather than like a formulaic cookie cutter. I've seen this a million times before, which happens,
Or also the benevolent nature of the character. Like you think somebody is
right,
in
good.
Their camp.
Sure, and then characters as well, changing sides and allegiance, and all that stuff that's why you have to have it all throughout to make it interesting, to make us want to or in a screenplay want to turn that page. We're like, I want to have a page turner. Just like that's the way the movie's going to be, hopefully, a page turner. I can't wait to the next scene. Cliffhangers. It's a TV show, cliffhanger. We end up this episode, they come at the end of the cliff. They're going to go, and the next, you caught my, no, they got saved,
Or especially like in films where everybody seems dark in terms of their motives, but
Right.
actually you find out. Like I'm thinking of Margin Call. It was great, great. Did you watch Margin
No,
Call?
I
Oh, you
didn't.
didn't see that? Okay. Yeah, it was about. Well, we'll skip it. But
Everybody seems
except for
a
Stanley
particular-
Tucci's character, but most people there, you're like, all of the characters, their motives seem, this is during the recession,
Right.
and you're not sure who's going to lose their job,
Right,
and
right.
who's kind of quote selling out, and just it keeps you on your toes because you're not sure.
Yeah, that definitely keep an audience watching. Look at some of the, like I say, some of the best films, and look at those and say, how did that work? And again, characters too. We want to go on the ride where we like these characters. That's another thing too. When I read the script, I'm like, we want to care about them. It's another thing. When I read a script, I'm like, I don't really care about just because they're here on the page.
Right. Yeah.
I want to root for them, or be surprised, or some kind of emotional response.
Let's say Glenn Ross.
Yeah,
So not all of the characters, in fact, many of them were not likable.
sure.
But there was something in them, like let's say Jack Lemon's character.
Yeah,
You
there's
cared
something-
about him.
right.
You saw the desperation, and you were, but they weren't maybe necessarily people you'd want to work with. But
Yeah.
there was something in them that you cared for.
Yeah, that's hard to craft. I mean, absolutely.
What do new screenwriters need to know about story structure? What would you teach them?
Well, story structure, that you have to have an idea that can fill, let's say, a screenplay. Many times someone sits down to write, they say, I have an idea for a script, and it really quite isn't a fully fleshed out story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so I would say before you sit down, you can have a kernel of an idea which blossoms into something bigger, but try to work on it where you can step back away and go, is this a movie? As we know, movies, is it going to be big enough? And there are small stories. I'm not saying that small stories aren't movies, but if you're going to write a feature film for, big Hollywood for, 4,000 screens, it may not be this little idea, and sometimes even when I see an outline, there's not enough story there to facilitate 100 pages. You think it is, and you're like, well, you kind of skipped over most of the second act here. You didn't quite think through all that. And structure is extremely important. So screenplays are built on, telling the story. So your story was originally, your question about structure.
Do you think then a lot of people just have a great beginning and then a finishing, and then in the middle is very muddy?
Yes,
Okay.
it's always muddy in the middle, and the first act is the easiest setup because it's all set up, right? We're all setting up the thing, and then you have to go on the journey in Act 2, and that's where it starts to get more difficult because, like I say, if you're just winging a script, it's always those big, barren wasteland in the middle that's really, you can know the ending, hopefully it'll get you there. I know the ending scene, fantastic, you know where you have to get, but all that stuff in between, that always seems to be the issue, is the big, let's say it's Act 2, the middle part, which is pretty much the meat and potatoes of, the movie.
What has helped you get to a better second act?
Well, knowing the ending for sure, but also really getting to the essence of what am I trying to do with this story? You know what I mean? What's my theme? What's this about? Is it just, two people on a car ride and they drive across the country? Great, that could be an amazing story, but what happens? What is it about? What's the problem? What do they have to face? What to get to that ending part? And working on an outline, I hate to refer back to that, is working on the story. So you just, and sometimes a story, you think something's there and it doesn't work, and other times I've done many drafts of an outline where I couldn't find the story and I kept trying to fight it, and then I realized that it had to do with the characters. And so the story was there, the A, B, C, and D of it, but it still wasn't working. So a lot of times you can have an idea which, you have to work at the idea. You have to work it into its, its full essence of what it can be. And sometimes you may want to just leave it alone and say, you know what, I don't think that's a story that I can manage together, and I'm going to move on to something else. That's okay too.
Do you think a lot of people have trouble letting go of their stories? Like, what if it's a very personal story?
Well, yeah. Well, if it's a personal story, it would be hard to let go, trying to force it. But then I might say, maybe it's not meant to be a screenplay. Maybe it's meant to be something else. Maybe a book, or I don't know what it could be. And that's for the writer to decide if it really is not working, and it's okay to move on to something else. There's no harm, no foul,
Have you done that where you're like, you know what, I love these characters, but for some reason this isn't going, I mean, for things that you've written on your own, not been paid to write?
I have a hard time, I'm so strict about it has to be like a really good idea of my own that it sort of, I have this inner filter that it limits that, unfortunately. So many times I've said this one just is not, it's not working. And other ones you see right away because the characters are so vibrant and alive, and you're like, yeah, I can see this. That this is what it works. And like I said, there's no harm in maybe putting it aside too. Maybe another time as you can become a more experienced writer, that you can go back to it and work on it. So nothing's ever dead. You don't have to discard it completely. Nor do I think you should, but to move on is okay as well. You put it in the notebook and say, and that's how you build ideas. That's how you build an arsenal of stuff that you can go back and work on and keep your creative well full,
You've also talked about just living life
Yes.
as well. To how do you know when, aside from not being on an assignment, that it's time to go and fill the well? Because I know that the life behind a computer can get very one-dimensional.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I hate sitting at the keyboard. I mean, it's a necessity, but you also have to live your life. And like we were talking about, that an authentic life outside your comfort zone is a good thing. Do things that you're afraid of. I don't mean jump off a cliff, but I went skydiving once, and that was one time only. But it wasn't just to go, some people were going and they said, hey, you want to come? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And it's not something I would ever do again. And I'm not a daredevil type person, but it was an amazing experience. And those kind of experiences, you can write into your projects where it's not just you're living in a little protected bubble where you're writing stuff that you've seen on television or movies, where you're just regurgitating, which could be cliches to begin with, which probably are. That's where your own personal experience comes into characters and your unique voice and things, because I've lived it. I went to blah, blah, blah. I've been there, type of thing. So yeah, writers should have interesting lives, if possible.
Yeah, because I was watching a masterclass with David Sedaris.
Oh, yes.
It's hilarious. And he picks up garbage, I guess, around the little town that he lives in.
Wow.
And he says that, he wears his vest and he does it, and people don't realize a lot of times that he's this writer, this author. And
sure.
So sometimes they'll be like, oh, sir, you actually missed a piece over here. And he goes with it.
Yeah.
And he says, this gets me out. This is where I'm able to see people in ways that I wouldn't see them when I'm speaking in front. They're not going to talk to me like that, And he goes with it, and he, oh yeah, sure, sorry about that. And so that's part of his way. He's doing a good thing, and he also gets out and interacts with people.
And he's observing life too. As an actor or writer, it's good to observe the world around you. Get off the phone, and actually go, oh my gosh, that's interesting. This is real life out here. It's an interesting character. Or, oh, I heard that little, at the coffee shop, that person said that thing, write it down in your notebook. These are cool little things you can start building upon. It's part of your job to be an observer as well as an adventurer, I think. So, I don't mean, take off, quit your job and, sail across the world if that's your thing, but you can do it, like you say, with small things. that just are kind of different. Like, I normally wouldn't do that, and don't be afraid to try that, because it all will filter back, hopefully, into your work, into your writing. So when someone reads something, it won't be, I saw this scene last week on television, or you know what I mean? It's sort of like different and fresh, unique, because it's personal. It's a personal experience,
It feels like in some ways there's less places to go these days. A lot of bookstores aren't around anymore.
Yes, I know.
And that used to be one place where you could just get out,
Yes.
And yeah, you can go to a coffee shop, and there's some great ones, but people are also busy with headphones on.
Sure.
And
they're all doing their own thing, and not sort of like, I'm in my own little world, you're in your
right.
world, yeah.
Yeah, but it is helpful because you just don't know. I mean, aside from maybe vacations or something, what are some other things you do to get yourself out of that?
Well, just try to get out in the world, try to, I tend to be an introvert sometimes when I'm working, so then you got to be like, get out of there, go. And it's not like it hasn't been done in the past, obviously, but you have to keep yourself in check that it doesn't become like, 80-20 of 80 introvert, 20, when it was more before, because it can slip very easily that way, where you're like, I don't want to go out, I want to do this thing. Just being around people too. Good, bad, indifferent, whatever.
Sure, sure, yeah. You see all sorts of stuff out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, was it Jackie Gleason who said his advice for like people then in the industry was get out, like don't be a shut-in?
And also, I think get out of the business, because Hollywood is like this weird little place where everybody around is talking about the business, and you're like, is there anybody saving lives here at this party? Do we have a doctor or something? No, at times it really is like, and we all want to congregate together because everybody's bibbity-bobbity network, but many times it's really great. Some big actor, I remember his best friends are not even in the business. They're just, people not in the film business. And you're like, yeah, that's refreshing, I have both, in and out,
Sure.
So it's good to have a nice mix. But if you're just around that only, it's sort of like this fake world, kind of thing, so.
What structure have you used the most often?
The pseudo 3-act, but, for TV movies, it's 8 acts and a coda at the end. So it's, it's about 9 to 11 pages per act, but the first one's the longest, which I like breaking it up that way because it seems a lot less, this big middle act, let's say, I'm just paraphrasing, let's say act 2 starts on page 20, and goes to 80, it's 60 pages, but if it's, and you're like, oh, I'm not even through act 2, but if you're sort of like, well, I've done 11 pages, I'm now into act 3, it's sort of structured in that way. But, specs are basic around act 3 kind of structure type thing,
So forgive me, with TV, because sitcoms aren't maybe what they used to be, and you're watching more serialized content.
Yes, without breaks, yeah.
So it's changed then. So the sitcom structure was one thing.
Yeah, I'm talking about, like network television, which still have commercials. But yeah, streaming,
It would be the same as a movie almost.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would think, yeah. The scripts I've read for, streaming, they have the ability just to have, 35 minutes is, kind of thing. The Game of Thrones were over an hour. Some of them were like hour 5 maybe, which you'd never find on network TV. It'd be like the 60 minutes, we're on to the next thing.
Right. But then there's a continuation, so
yeah.
it's
But there's more, I think it's great. There's more room to play with that, on streaming platforms and things. It doesn't have to be adhere to this exact, like, it's got to be, like the old, it was half hour is 22 pages with commercials, and the hour is 42 with commercials. It's like that strict kind of thing, which they go, no, it's 65. Oh, 70 minutes, because you're just watching the thing.
Right. So there's a resolution within each episode, but then there's a through line that it's going to continue.
Yeah.
Okay, unless it's the final.
Unless it's just a one-off. I mean, sorry, a movie. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But I still think it still does follow the same A, B, and C. You know, first, second, third act, wrap it up type of thing.
Even within that one
Yeah.
30, 40-minute serialized.
Because essentially you sit there for some movies out now are almost 3 hours. So, it was reading about we've been trained into watching movies, and if you start to shift, it's attention span too.
Sure.
I guess, if it's engaging, I'll sit there for 3 hours and forget it is.
Well, some movie theaters have comfortable chairs and some
Yes,
don't.
yeah.
I will say
It's
that.
true. Yes, they've changed a lot. Where it's like, yeah,
Some are you're in an amazing recliner.
yeah, you can fall asleep. So
Sure.
I missed that middle hour. It didn't matter.
And then others are like, it feels like it's, at a family barbecue and
Right,
somebody
yeah,
got a chair from the garage. So,
A metal chair.
Right. But,
Right. But if it's engaging, I think, if a movie, like you were saying, how do you capture if it's engaging, I'll watch a 3-hour movie and I'll just be like, wow, that was 3 hours? You captured my attention. Wow. But other times, if you're shifting, this is too long, this is like, or you're just like, what's going on? Let's wrap this as self-indulgent,
Yeah, it's interesting. When you sit next to someone or near someone that's enjoying a film, I feel like it's contagious.
Yes.
And then the opposite.
Right, if they're fidgety or they're,
Or there's like this family drama going around and they're changing seats.
Right, yeah.
What are you doing? The movie's
This
already...
isn't your living room.
No. And I've seen that. And
Yeah.
then I've actually moved and I sat next to a woman who loved the film and it was great. And we were
Right.
both laughing at the same parts. Never saw her again, but it was enjoyable
Yes,
because I sat
that
next to her.
collective energy where you go opening night and that energy of like everybody's there to be entertained, and you can feel it. It's almost palpable,
Yeah.
And it's the same way you're talking about where if people are like,
Taking phone calls in the aisles and...
Yeah. Or the phone lights up and you're like, oh my gosh, you just ruined the thing for me. I'm a purist. I have to, when I go in, there's no talking.
Absolutely.
I went with a friend and I'd never been to the movies with him. And I didn't realize he was the worst person in the world to go to a movie with. And we're watching, and I think it was some action movie. And and he turns to me, and I see him out of the corner of my eye, and I don't want to look at him. And I'm like, what? And he goes, oh my gosh. He goes, that was so crazy. It would never happen, but you believe it, right? And I'm like, why are you talking to me? So I put him on the list, never to see a movie with him again. It's scary because now I go alone. I'm like, I don't want anybody, before the trailers. It's very important because that's the, I say it's the church of cinema. You're going in for the one time you're probably going to see it. And that first time is so important, how you feel. And, you see a movie successive times and it could be one of your favorites, but I don't want to be interrupted. I want to have my own thing, and a lot of times now it's just, it's hard. Even when you go on off times, you're like, don't you people have jobs? It's like the movie's filled at noon.
Sure.
It's like, isn't everybody working?
I like to see movies with people.
I do too.
But not when they're on their phones. And I've definitely seen,
Yeah.
I've witnessed some major arguments
Sure.
during the movie.
But it's more,
Yeah.
if you go to the theaters like the Cinematheque, there's going to be a different type of, fan moviegoer there because they'll respect the process. I found that.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, you're right. Yeah. But
Right.
you're like, okay, with the munching of the thing and the swirling of the Coke, right back here. That's happened too with the big gulp. I'm like, or the picnic lunch that was brought in one time. Yeah, the whole theater's empty. I go, great, I'm gonna see this movie alone. And a couple come in with their picnic. And they sit down. I'm in the middle of the theater, empty. They sit down right in front of me.
Of course.
Crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. You want this? And I start smelling like smells. I'm like, food, not popcorn, like, food, meats,
Barbecue,
things.
yeah.
But I'm like, oh my gosh, crinkle, crinkle. You had to sit right in front of me, huh?
Sure, of course.
Because it's the collective, yeah.
Yeah.
So that part of that's what shies me away from going to the theater,
Yeah. Well, I had a woman that wanted me to clean her seat because it was dirty. And I said, well, maybe we could just look this. Anyway, we won't go into that. But yeah.
Yeah. We still love going to the movies.
I do. I love it.
I love it.
When you see it with the right audience and they're enthusiastic and
it's-
they're respectful, It's fantastic.
And sometimes you walk out and you know, it resonates with you, and you just want to go home and write a fantastic movie like you've seen. You know, that's when it's magic.
Sure.
You know,
sure.
and that happens every so often.
Or you have the rare conversation with a total stranger
Sure.
about the subject matter.
Sure.
And it's and you see in that moment how powerful just that experience was.
Sure. With all these strangers in a darkened theater, and you're like, wow, we don't even know each other, but we're here for, I don't want to say church, but you know, it's a similar thing.
Really is.
We're all coming into, this is where the movie was meant to be seen, not on your phone.
No.
I didn't shoot it in 70 millimeter for you to, you know, go on a rail stop and go, oh, that's great, you know.
Sure.
But we can watch it how we want, but it's, you know,
Right.
it's nice when you see the pure cinema that was meant to be, you know, from its intent, rather than, you know, movies have become just another thing now. You know, it's a disposable, like, oh yeah, it's another form of, movies used to be the only thing, you know, and then television came in, but then they had to compete. And so we got to make bigger, you know, widescreen and keep all that. But now there's so much stuff, video game, there's so much noise and things to distract you that it's another thing. People used to dress up to go to movies. I mean, dress up like with tuxedos, like it was a night out to be, you know, we're going to the movies. Oh, you know, more people went to the movies like in the 40s and 50s than they do today.
The Depression.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that people want to be there, and I love to be in a crowd of
Sure, the
moviegoers.
popcorn, the smell, the anticipation. You know, the greatest childhood memories are going into that movie theater, and the lights come down, and you know the logo, you know, and there's Star Wars. You're like, oh, and it takes you away to this galaxy, and you're like, oh man, I want to do that. You know, how do I create stories? You know, that's fantastic. I want to be a filmmaker. You know, it's the greatest memories of being a kid, is going to see that and being influenced by movies.
Sure,
You know?
I can still see E.T.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Great. What are the top 3 mistakes a new screenwriter is likely to make on their first screenplay?
Big one, I think number one is overwriting, not knowing what to put in and what to leave out. So the script is, you know, big speeches and things. It can be cleaned up as long as you know that it has to be cleaned up in the second draft. You know, I mean, hopefully there'll be knowledge to know that. Number 2, not proofreading the script, you know, typos and also format issues, which maybe format would be the third thing, you know, separate those typos. Basically, not being, you know, people get excited about finishing something, and you have to keep it close until it really is worth having someone read it, because, you know, it's a big problem if you know, it's going to represent you, and if it's not in a good shape, you know, it's not in a proper form to be read, then you won't get a second read, or that person, you know, will look upon you and say, you know, the writer's not good.
How does a writer determine their strengths and weaknesses?
Good question. A lot of times a writer's strength could, you know, I was thinking back to writing partners, which I had at one time for a number of years, and what our strengths were. And my partner's strength was coming up with the idea. He would have a dream and say, we're having coffee in the morning. I have our next movie. And that wouldn't be such a strength of mine, because I'm very picky about ideas, and you know, they come few and far between for me. Not, you know, some people are like, everything's an idea for a movie. It kind of isn't. You have to work more at some, and others are definitely not, you know, just boom. So his strength was coming up with the idea. My strength was actually for us to be able to sit down and write the idea, you know, structure, all this kind of thing. So, and he knew as well, but I was the one at the keyboard, you know, and so sometimes a writer also can have a strength of dialogue. So let's say a partner is like really good with dialogue and the other's good with structure, or both of them are good at both, you know. But I think the more that you write and find what your strength and weaknesses are, will be from what notes you receive, you know, over time and time again. Like, well, structure-wise, this is off and that. Your dialogue's great. Your character's you know what I mean? So I think you can only find out what your strengths or weaknesses by doing it. And then when you find a weakness, try to build upon that and get better, make it a strength.
Sure. So it's only by getting feedback, and if you don't have a writing partner, sending it out for notes, having
Sure.
a friend.
Yeah, or writers groups or a consultant or someone to read it. And these things, it takes time, of course. And from, let's say you write a first script, you're not going to have any idea what your strength is that you got to page 100, and you may have all the strengths possible, but you also, everybody has a weakness that has to be built upon, to have it all be up at the same level. So what you want to do is calibrate that, and it'll take time, but also, like you said, it'll take, I think, from feedback, because you'll see time and time again what am I not doing right? What's not hitting the mark? Well, your dialogue still isn't. It all sounds the same. I'm kind of weak at dialogue, but I can really craft a great structure. Type of thing. So I think after 2 or 3 or more scripts, maybe you start to say, well, I should really study dialogue more. Like we were talking about, record it and be out in the world, listen to how, inflections, tone, diction, things like that. So.
Yeah, I'm always shocked at how, personal conversations, like on people's cell phones, I guess you could get some incredible stories from them. I'm always surprised that people are willing to share such personal information in a public space.
And you only hear the one side.
Yeah, and I've heard some doozies in my time just being in a store and like, oh my goodness, like
right.
This person has, either they don't care.
The test came back.
Yeah, I've heard all sorts of stuff. And so
and you can only imagine what's being said on that other side. That's great, which is a technique, like in a scene too, where it's like we don't, we can only know what's on this side in our mind, type of thing.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it keeps, like, I'm thinking, who is this other person on the
right.
end? And usually it's someone that's not doing a lot of talking.
Sure. Or they don't say, hi, honey, or, what's going on here?
Right.
That you would say, well, that's a good, I love how everybody says, that's a good idea for a movie. You go, it's not. What is it? It's like, okay, it's a kernel, which could be built, but what is it about? What do we, Or someone comes to your party and says, hey, you write scripts, don't you? Yeah, when I can. And they go, I got a good idea for a movie. You're like, great. And I say, you should write it. They go, oh, I'm not a writer. I said, well, you want me to write your idea? They say, yeah, it's great. And then they pitch it to you and you go, yeah, okay, I'll think about it. And not to, sometimes, but it's like every idea is an idea for a movie, If it's worked on, yeah, and sometimes like we were talking about, you beat the dead horse and you walk away. You're like, it's not,
Forgive me for this question. What's the stupidest way to write a screenplay?
Well, you're talking to someone who's a big fan of the outline, so I would say, and not that the person who does it is stupid.
But those are my words, not yours. Yeah.
Your words.
My words, Karen.
Yeah. Yep. Send the letters and cards.
Yeah, they know the email.
It would be just to sit down and say, I got an idea, a half-baked idea that really wasn't thought out, and you can do what you want, which is fine. But I just think, and you may find there's a scene in there that's great and brilliant, but a cohesive through line and all that, it takes time. It takes work. This isn't something that just spills out. Some people say, I can just spill a script out in a week. Well, that's fantastic, and we'll see how good it is. And maybe you can do that. Everybody's got their own way. But there are a lot of pitfalls in doing that, with the story, and things aren't working. And I hate when I sit there and I write something and I know it's just bad. The best times, and we all go through that, but the best times are where it's like this weird channeling, and I can see it in my mind's eye, and that's going onto the page, and I feel good about it because it's like I already watched it in the theater, but it hasn't existed yet except in my head so it's, in a way, when it's really good, it feels like you're channeling it, and when it's bad, there's something, the channel is not, those waves are not coming through. Not to be like,
You're on dial-up.
new age.
Yeah, dial-up versus
Sure. you're tapping into your creative thing, your well, whatever you want to call it, where you go, and it's the signal's not, and you just write down a scene. You're like, that's going to have to be rewritten. Imagine. Now a person probably wouldn't think that just burning through a script. Oh, this is great. Oh, but when it's just bad, when you're like oh my God, it's garbage. It's terrible. Like a placeholder instead of the real scene. Yeah, okay, well, this is the bad version, as everyone says. You get that note from people say, well, here's the bad version, and they tell you it, and you're like, that's really not that bad. But no, I don't want you to do that. But here's an example of what not to do. The bad version, as you hear in Hollywood a lot. And I'm like, are you ever going to tell me the good version? And they said, no, that's for you to figure out. I'm like, oh, you're right. You're right. Because I'm the writer, right? Throw me a lifeline here. I'm drowning because I got the bad version that's the real bad version.
Is this Sunset Boulevard?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it almost similar to the people that in college said, I don't have to study, I just show up for tests?
In a way. And there's some that can. I've never met any. But yeah, especially with the odds that there's so many scripts out there, and so many good scripts too, that I think a lot of times writers may not see the mountain that they're climbing every day, or what they're, you're not only up against your own competing with yourself, to be a better writer next time and learn like you should, but also what's actually out there if you want to work in the marketplace type of thing. And I know when you say that, when I say that, it sounds very non-romantic, but it's a business, so why not put your best foot forward in creating that, unless you have if you have a good day job and there's no pressure, to that this script has to sell, to make your rent or your mortgage payment, and you're just like, yeah, I'll dabble in it. But dabbling takes time as well. And so, while you're dabbling, another person is working 24 hours a day and learning the craft and really, they want it more than anything else. And it can be a hobby. It's fine, but I think there are ways to approach a career or a writing career in a certain way. And people can try it however they want. But back to your original question, is just to go, I think I have an idea, and not really, whoa, hold on a second, what are you doing here with this idea? Every idea is a kernel of a premise that builds now, but do we have enough? Type of thing. And not to second guess like what's selling. If it's really a passion idea you want to write, absolutely. Go, you must do it. But you also, yeah.
And what about people that say, well, I don't want to write for TV, or I don't want to write a movie that doesn't have A-list talent in it, and they stomp on something because it's not Star Wars?
Sure.
What do you say to that? They want to be a screenwriter. Mm-hmm. They want to work in the industry, mm-hmm. but no, that's not 48 hours, or I'll pick more.
There's some
movie. Sorry, let me just pick something in the last few decades.
No, I know what you mean.
Right. Okay. It's not. It's.
But you're saying they stomp on the smaller ideas. Mm-hmm. Yes, I read a lot of scripts that are big ideas, big Hollywood ideas, which is fantastic. But the real odds of an unknown, uncredited writer, it could happen. It does once in a great, not as much as it used to in the past, selling that thing, that's the only thing they've written, because intellectual property, IP is all the rage. It's already been a book. It's been, a comic book. It's been a sequel, a prequel. Star Wars is a perfect example. We just manufacture it until the end, and then we come up with a new series, right? That's all done. We'll veer off on this one, and we'll take that character and we'll make a whole series on that one. That's a bigger. That you're trying to hit a home run out of the park which we all do all the time. But I think you're also shrinking your possibility because they already have the A-list writers out there, who are filling those jobs. And how do they get there? Well, I don't know. Everybody has their own journey. If you trace, I was saying a writer who's a big TV person now and features started on Xena Princess Warrior. Now people would look down and go, Xena, that's a ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. Everybody starts somewhere.
Sure.
And was it his heart's desire to work on that show forever? No, but that was a stepping ground. Everybody has that stepping ground. You just don't, my experience and the people I've known, you just don't start out at the top. You take the job and you go, yeah, okay, it's not my perfect thing, but I'll do, it's a step-by-step process. So I would say in that way, don't step on those little ideas because those are the ones that can be made. You're taking a bigger gamble writing this $100 million script that's locked into that budget. It can't be made for less. So then you say, well, where can it be made? I don't know, there's 4 studios that could possibly do this. Let's say they all pass. Where are you going to go with the script? Somebody's going to shell out $100 million of their own money? I mean, you know what I mean? So the smaller idea, smaller in scope, meaning, we're not out to save the universe. The universe could be your own life. Your little universe could actually be made. $5 million, $2 million. It's not glamorous like a lot of writers. Well, I'll just sell my script for millions of dollars, and you think that your life changes overnight. You still have the same problems. You still have the same relationship. You're still a person. It's just it's a job. You know what I mean? It's sort of, and I hate to sort of shrink it down to that, but it's like, oh, a screenwriter, yeah. I used to think the same way too in film school. Oh my God. You read the trades, you're like, oh, I'm gonna live the life. Live the life, yeah. You're gonna be living the life at 2 a.m. writing the screenplay. That's what it is, it's work, it's not glamour. There's times when you're forgotten about at a screening. Happened. Where they thank everybody, bling, bang, and then they thank the craft service, and then they go, let's run the film. And you're sitting with the stars, and they look at you, and you're mortified. You're like, and then afterwards, of course, it was an oversight. And at the party, it was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Have another martini,
I'll call you.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't that bad.
Oh,
but
okay.
It was just, you know what I mean? It's not all going to be, and if you're in it for that fame and fortune and fanfare, not the writer. I mean, we've made inroads a little more than the past, but it's still, you're still the writer. I mean, it's one of the most important people because that's where, without the scripts, as they say, there's nothing, right? But, that's why you should try to be a hyphenate, writer-producer, writer-director or something like that eventually. I mean, or start out as that's your choice. That's your career direction. But just the writer, it's an interesting road.
What's the difference between a professional level script and one that's written by an amateur?
Professional level script can, I would say, compete in the professional marketplace where someone could receive a screenplay and read it and not go, this has too many problems that this person probably isn't. They're not writing at a professional level, meaning that somebody would say, oh my gosh, we could make this. It's not plagued with the problems I think we spoke about before about, the first time overwriting the script and the structure doesn't really work and it's confusing and it's not fulfilling, the ending doesn't wrap it up, things, if you were to read that. And also, as we mentioned before, format too. You look at the script and if it's all over the place where it's kind of clunky and weird and it's going to be, it's not professionally written.
How soon into reading a screenplay do you know that it's bad?
Well, it's usually in the beginning, but many times you're fooled because the beginning is easy to set up. So you're like, oh, this is great. And then the longer it goes on, it runs out of steam. And then it just really is like, okay, or that it's too long. It's like too many pages, and there's a whole nother story and a half there that shows that it needs to have a lot of editing. And if it was a first draft, it's a script and a half almost. A script and a third, let's say, which is overwriting. So
then a reader will know fairly quickly.
A reader will probably know in the first page or two if it's the format giveaway or it's just the style giveaway where it's, you know what I mean? You can tell. I mean, people all the time post one page on the internet, they put up a page of their script and you can see it and go, okay, it's a giveaway. It's a clear giveaway. Or you can see another page and go, wow, it's so clear. Like you're seeing what they meant to, like you're seeing what they're writing, not bump and who got out of the car? And, and that goes back to, in a way it goes back to format and how, what you're going to put in and what you're not based upon the story.
What do you think about 99% of screenplays being rejected after the first page?
I don't know if I think they would be read. They're not thrown in the garbage after page one. I think a script is given a chance. I mean, I would hope, from a reader, and then it's the overall feeling of it. But like we were discussing before, if there's too many bumps and, the famous thing is, oh, this bumps for me, it's like, it bumped, okay? It means, I know what they mean, but it's probably like, boom, it sort of bumped in a not a good way where it was confusing, or the story was like, why did it go that way? And I didn't understand it was this and that. And a lot of times, sadly, it's because of skimming, where someone just literally, I had read one time that some people just read the dialogue, or some producer just reads dialogue. He doesn't read the directions, just reads the dialogue, I don't know what, that's not really reading the script, but I think, as we were discussing before, you can tell in the first few pages if it's going to be one of those scripts or if it's going to be like, wow, this is a page turner. I can already see that. It's hard to hide that if you're not writing at a particular level. So that'll be a dead giveaway, which is not good.
So you think, though, people give it more than just a scene?
Oh, sure.
Oh, you do?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. The old adage is like, well, it doesn't happen within the first 10 pages. It used to be the first 20, but now it's shrunken down. If it doesn't happen, if I'm reading and it doesn't happen for me, you sort of have to know what we're getting into. But again, these aren't rules not coming from me. I'm just saying
sure.
That some movies like, European films take longer to happen. And, I'm talking about Hollywood. If you want to work in that system, it better happen. The reader's got to go 10 pages. I still don't know what's happening. You got to get an idea like, oh, we see this and that. That's what they're talking about is it happening, and they'll read through the script. No, but if you're plagued with typos, 3 or 4 a page, it means you don't care enough to proofread your script, and you don't care about enough for the person who's reading its time. So right away, there's a disrespect there. Like, well, I just wanted to blow through it because, my idea is so good, I don't have to proofread the script. Okay, these are attitudes that won't serve you well in the long run.
What are your thoughts on Hollywood stealing an unknown writer's idea? Does this happen a lot?
I think it happens a lot less than people believe, because like my old writing partner and I used to say, we'd make more money off the lawsuit than we would on the screenplay. Go ahead and steal. And, it'd be such a pleasure for you to steal our idea. That means it's something good, But you writers do. A writer asked me like, okay, what's this process of copyright, before I let anybody read it? And I was like, okay, you can copyright the script. It takes a process. It's money, and or you can register at the guild, or some say that even by the mere existence of creating it is a copyright. So there's all sorts of factors. But what I've read is that the copyright would protect you more in court. But the thing with that is that you never own the copyright of a screenplay, because the minute you sell it, it becomes a work for hire. So you always have to sign over the rights to the company. So that was given away a long time ago in guild negotiations, that the writer never owns the copyright of the script. So it's okay to do that, but when you see on the cover it says registered WGAW number 1265555, that's just a dead giveaway of like an amateur that's afraid of my stuff being stolen. You know what I mean? No professional writes that on the cover of a script. I think professionals expect you to do your due diligence, and what I think the more chance of something being stolen is a pitch, because that's out in the ether. Like I was saying before, my writing partner and I would go on these pitch fests, that their agent would send us on to like 12 companies. And we'd do the same pitch around town. And at 2 o'clock, we've got with this person. And our manager would ask us, agent and manager, go, how did it go? And we'd say, well, they didn't, their eyes didn't light up. And they go, okay, maybe you should switch it and change this element. So from the afternoon on, we changed a different version of the thing. But my point is, it's all a living, breathing thing. And so somebody could wake up the next morning and go, now they might not be the exact pitch, but let's say an element of it, and go, you know what, I have an idea, and that works in. What do you do about that? But you can't be that way where you think everybody's going to steal your stuff. It's just not. You can be smart, and when you send out your script, you should keep track in a log or journal or spreadsheet who's reading the script every time out. If you don't have an agent or manager who that's their job, obviously they'll know that, and it'll be through an official channel. But somebody says, oh yeah, give me the script. I work at a company. Okay, that goes down. Who read it? When? Because these are important things to know. Who you don't want to send you want to know who's reading it. That's important too. Because if it starts getting bad feedback, you never hear about it. And then suddenly things start being like, why don't I get a meeting with that company? Because people are talking now. In the old days, would go in a database and there'd be coverage. The studio would now have the coverage, and you couldn't fool them, because they go, oh yeah, we read that 2 years ago. They're trying to pawn that off on us again. So I wouldn't be too fearful of. And there was a few stories about outright theft, but I think it's so. You can't be afraid to send your stuff out. And it's sort of an arrogant idea where it's like, well, my idea is so genius that they're going to steal it. Like Warner Brothers doesn't have enough amazing ideas already. And yours might be the one they steal, but it'd be a good lawsuit.
But that being said, though, don't be irresponsible sending it out.
No.
Log the date, the place,
absolutely,
the address even.
Oh yeah, no, keep it all, because you want to keep track of who's reading your stuff. You want to keep in control of that. And that's why when writers post their stuff, like a script up on their web page, I would say, don't do that. You don't know who's reading it. You don't know who's stealing your ideas, right? You have no way of tracking that. If you're afraid of that, that's even worse, because somebody's just going to your website, and I know it's a way to promote your stuff, but that's not the way. To have your full script on your website for someone just to read. Who's reading it? You want to keep track of that.
What are the best ways to make people read your script?
Well, you could put a gun to their head.
Okay.
No.
Maybe a softer approach.
Yeah, softer approach. Well, you have to ask who. What are we talking about? Industry people or friends and
people
family?
that could actually. Well, no.
Yeah.
People that could actually have something done with it or get it to an appropriate person to have it made.
Well, before that happens, like we were discussing before, it had better be in a professional level of writing and also presentation, execution. And so when you get one chance, like I would say, you may have a friend at a company that runs the company, right? And you go, well, I have an in there. Okay, that's great. But when you're going to play that hand of sending that script over, it better be ready. you can't play that hand. You should be be very disciplined and be patient, because sometimes people get excited and they want to play all the hands, and it wasn't the script, and then now it's like, I'm your friend, but I also have a business, you know what I mean? So I just can't hire you. I just can't buy your movie. And it's going to be more difficult to go back there again. So you don't know if somebody's going to like your script. You have to like it. And the way that you make them like it is show that you're passionate about what you're writing, and that you've done all those things, like proofreading, which sounds simplistic, but it's important. I mean, it's offensive when I'm going to take the time to read, you open it up and you're like, oh, and you want to be a writer? You can't, there's spell check, there's things like that. Scripts are all about the tiny details, and those are looked over. And so what attitude is the person reading going to have of you, about being serious meaning you want to be a professional.
When you're writing a screenplay, do you ever think about the money you'll make off of it as you're writing it?
No, because I already have a contract, so I know. Now a spec, yeah, you can have illusions of grandeur, as much as you want, but after years in the business, the realities of like, okay, but no, you shouldn't write from a place of that. You should forget about all that. Like I say, you should do the best job ever if you're paid $500 or you're paid $5 million. There should be no difference in your desire, because then what are you doing? You're chasing money. There's other businesses to do that are far more lucrative than spending years of your life toiling away and trying to have that one. This is the one that's going to do it. So no, you should just bathe in the creative process and not it's when you're writing your specs. When you're writing an assignment, you already have a contract, you know what you're making, so. And then it becomes, stressful because you're actually making something. So you're like, oh shoot, this is due when? This better be good, this is what they're paying me for. So that comes on a different level, when you leap over into that other realm of working, like we discussed earlier about being creative under a deadline, than just toiling away. You can work. It's great to work when you want, my spec, I'm just doing, this, and there's nobody else, not working with anybody else. There's all my words, and which it has to be to get to a certain point, absolutely. But then you step over that line into the other world, and it's like, well, we don't like the ending. And then and it becomes, like they say, filmmaking is a million compromises to get something done. And sadly, yeah. But to get something done is amazing.
And does that go back to what we were talking about with the Tai Chi or the karate example, which is part of it's the physical and part of it's the mental,
yeah.
And maybe that pressure of like, I've got to be creative and I've got a deadline, and not cracking under that pressure.
Sure. It's a lot of it, a tremendous amount of it is mental, but then those disciplines you can fall back on not straight, because you can get into this terrible wheel that you're not producing at the best level you can because you're too worried about the other thing. If you just trust yourself and dive into the work, you'll get it done. If you're not constantly worried about, well, I got 8 days left, just do it.
How important is sticking to one genre for a new screenwriter?
I personally think it's, you eventually have to find what you like to write. And some people say, well, I like to write horror, I like to write drama, romantic comedy, and that's great. I'm not sure many people are good at all of that. You sort of gravitate toward what you dig. It's like, what I really liked, what movies do I like? And some people like, I only like romantic comedies. Okay. And some are like, I could not write a romantic comedy. So don't write what you don't like. Basically, I think William Goldman said it. Don't write Annie Hall if you don't like romantic comedies. It's pretty simple. But you have to test those first scripts, or that's what they're for, is to try to figure it out. Like, wow, I don't like action movies. To write them, it's kind of follows this thing and that. And now if you write drama, you know, a lot of most popular movies are hybrid. They're not just one thing. You know, they're supernatural, sci-fi, horror. You know, if you can find those different elements, those are the most popular films that don't just stick to one thing. You can find multiple genres within the, you know, subgenres in the one genre. But generally, the first thing that you sell is probably going to be the thing you're going to work at, because that's what they're going to sort of pigeonhole you and know you as a blah blah blah. You know, oh, you write drama. So when the agent or managers are sending you out, they're not going to send you to the romantic comedy people because you're not a comedy writer. And you say, well, I can write comedy. You know what I mean? So, but I think you have to find your way, and not to say you have to stick to one genre. You could be good in many, but just know that the first thing you sell is probably going to chart the way that you're going, you know.
Because you always hear that about actors, that they seem to get the same roles because Hollywood likes to kind of
pigeonhole.
You're right, they like to.
But they work all the time. So I always say pigeonholing, not a bad thing, you know, if you want to work. You know, you say, well, I want to break out of that, and some do. You know, some do. Character actors, you know, are great because they. But yeah, I think those first specs are ones to figure out, to find your way. Unless you really know, I like these movies. You know, I only write these. I'm not interested, and you can whittle it down. But you can also see that you might write a hybrid. You know, a supernatural horror movie, or something like that. You know, where you've got two genres mixed together. But I don't think if you sell that and it does well, they're going to say, hey, we're going to hire you for a comedy next. And, yeah, really? Do you do comedy? Unless you have one, but would you be working on that simultaneously? You know, I always think writers can write. You know, in the old days in the studio, they would have you on a noir, and then next week you'd be on a Western, you know, when they have the stable of writers, like in Sunset Boulevard, you know. And so they would write all different kind of movies. You know, they have the freedom and ability to do that. And then today they're auteurs who are known for one type of thing, which is great. If you can be that, you know, if you're the working screenwriter, you may fall into a place where you start to work in a genre and you're like, wow, I didn't realize that was my genre now. Not bad, it's okay, you know.
What's the biggest screenwriting pitch you've ever gone out on? And what happened?
Yeah, there was a pitch that I had with my writing partner. We had a lot of pitches. One solo I've been on that haven't been like, you know, oh my God, it's been with, you know, heads of television or whatever. But I specifically remember one pitch we did, and the head of the company was there. The whole strata of people were there, the assistant, the VP, and we went on for way too long. I mean, it was absurd how long the pitch was. They basically told us we saw the whole movie. You know, it was like a 20-minute pitch. And no one stopped us. And we were crazy enough to, rather than make it 5 minutes or, you know, and we walked out of there and our manager said, they're gonna buy this and blah, blah, blah. And it was just like, oh my God. And something happened where it never materialized. But there was another pitch, it wasn't big, but the guy made us wait. And he was late, and then we're sitting in the lobby and we see him in the office and he sees us and he like pulls the blinds and we're like,
no,
that's a good sign. And we had been around and I hadn't had lunch and I was like freaking out. I was like, I got to eat something. So I went in their pantry and I was like ripping open bags of cookies and stuff and OJ, I got to get my blood sugar up, you know? And then he comes out, hey, and he walks us into his room and we're like, whew, okay, he's back in our, you know. And we sit down and, what do you got for me? And we go, well, here we go. And we always would pitch where my partner was like P.T. Barnum, you know, and I would fill in the blanks here and there. We start to pitch and about 30 seconds into it, he stopped. Oh, stop. He goes, it's crap. He goes, I don't believe any of it. And we were like, he's joking. You know, of course he is, right? He was serious. And we both look at each other mortified. And we're like, wow, that's never happened. And then he came around from the desk, and leaned on the desk and said, okay, here's the thing. I got an idea from my nephew, and he sent me a 10-page email, and now he's pitching us. And I've never had it where ever. I mean, all the pitches in my entire life, so you never know, but they always let you finish. I mean, they'll interrupt you, but they'll let you finish the pitch. He cut us off at the knees, and then he pitched us. He twisted around, and you think, well, okay, maybe that'll be our idea. And he says, what do you think? And we were like, I don't know what to think. I think we got to get out of here, So we both left, and he rode the elevator down with us.
Oh, wow.
And he said, you need validation? I said, well, I was hoping it was from you, but yeah, I need it for the $18 to park, because you were late 45 minutes with your other meeting. Cookies were great in the pantry, but that doesn't, So he said, all right, go off and blah, blah, blah. And we never saw him again. But so you never know. Pitching is a really mixed bag. And I've also been on a pitch at a big production company with the heads of television. And it was an out-of-body experience. I mean, I was almost sitting like, who is this guy? I mean, I was sitting like next to myself watching it because and they were late, which many times, they'll make you wait. You're not, it's like the doctor's office. You're like, it was for 11:30. And they're like, I know, but it's 12. And I'm sorry. Would you like some water? No, I'd like scotch, please. Excuse me. And then you begin, and I was on, and sometimes you're just on, and you can see it. And the questions that they ask are at the end, which is great. They don't interrupt you in the middle. And then your train of thought, you're like, and you're, And the questions were just, what city do you see this happening? They weren't like, I didn't get the part about the thing. And you're like, oh no, because you practice your pitch backwards, forwards before you go. And it's a lot of it's improv too. You know what I mean? And you have to leave those spaces open for them to go, could it be a thing? Yeah. That's great. I love that. Oh my gosh. You've made it that much better. Yeah. But you have to leave it open for it to go, certain ways. And I left, and they were like, thank you very much. And I called my manager, and she was like, oh my God, I wish I could have been there and seen that. I said, it was high. It was a great high walking out of there. Now, they didn't buy it, but I pitched at a professional level where that door is completely open. So it's not like, yeah, you know what I mean? So you never know. You're just talking about pitching. It's a mixed bag, but you have to, it really helps to have a writing partner, when you both go in, right. Except the one guy, we wanted to like flip his desk over and go, what? And break the windows and say, he turned the tables on us for sure.
So when you leave a situation like the one that you just mentioned, not the one where you've had an outer body experience almost, but
the bad one.
The bad one.
Yeah.
How are you regrouping? Like, how are you saying?
Well, at that time we went back to our handler, and said, "Oh my gosh, and this is like ridiculous. We had such good pitches during the day, and that one was just from another planet. I don't know what happened there." And you don't let it rattle you too much. You got to move on, and that's not the end all be all. It was just a freaky deaky situation. You don't want all of them to be like that.
Sure.
And I remember another pitch. The person was like, almost falling asleep, and that's not good either. But you're like, at least you could hide that. I know you don't like it, and then the minute that we finished, she got up and said, well, thank you very much for coming in. You're like, was just a waste of time, everybody, Maybe you could tell, like they can, you can read. And another one was like, oh, there was one at a studio, there were like diapers around the office. Oh, my nanny usually has the kid, but I had to, there was like a little, and we're like, yeah, don't be distracted. We're only trying to, pitch for our lives here, So it's like, you never know.
When you come off of one that was like magical,
sure.
How soon are you finding out? They're telling you it's a pass right away?
Usually they get back to your agent or manager right, shortly thereafter. It's not like weeks after, no. And then they say, yeah, we really like what was, they're going to buy it. I mean, sometimes they buy it in the room, it happens. But more importantly about that is that you show that you have ideas that you have cohesive ideas that can actually, like we were saying, what makes something a TV show? Well, you can pitch something, they go, yeah, that's like the stuff we do, and so it's on that level of like, ooh, it's convoluted, it's all over the place, it's not even a good pitch, there's so many holes in it. That's what you don't want. So you've done your homework before you ever get there, and then that keeps the door open. And then, of course, you send a thank you card, which I always say, handwritten thank you card after that, not an email, to those people that you met with, because they'll get it a week later and even if they pass, they go, oh, Mark, yeah. You know what, because they're busy with a million other pitches, 100 a week or whatever, and it's like, oh yeah, I really liked Mark. That one pitch was close. And the closer you get each time, it's a little closer. And maybe the close only is here for a while. And sometimes the close has actually become something,
So even though you didn't get, it's like the one that got away,
Yeah,
it sounds like you still are left with a feeling of, I almost got there, rather than the one where you feel cheap.
Yes.
When you leave. Like it's a bad date.
Yeah, and just like there was going to be violence. I mean, when the guy was like, he came out from around the desk and goes, he's yelling at us. We're like, we looked at each other like, he's got to be joking, and he wasn't. It's one of those weird situations. Like,
oh yeah.
Whoo, he's serious. Okay, this train wreck just went off, is even worse, and now we're left with I don't know what we're left with, But what gets you into the pitch is your project. So they have to read something, right? So they read something, they go, oh, wow, this is a great pilot. Do you have anything else? I got this other idea. I've got 2 other ideas. Come on in. It's the round robins when you try to you get those fans of your writing. You want that at a lot of different places so that they can be, that door's open. What else do you have? That's why I say for writers that you must have a lot of material, a solid body of work that you've worked on that's at a professional level, because that script will get you in that company, and then they'll listen to your pitch, and then they'll say, we passed, but they won't say it in the room, they pass, but they tell your handler, and they say, what else does Mark have that's similar? Well, he's got another thing. Oh, well, we send it right over. So there's your next chance. Now, who knows if it'll sell or not, but you keep that. You can see how you can burn out stuff quickly too, sure. But you need that constant wheel, turning of creating material, not just the one script, because the one script could be a one-off where they go, this is fantastic. You got anything else that you've written? Sure. Well, I'm working on something and I'll be done in 6 months. Well, we'll see ya. I won't be here. I'll be fired. I'm the executive, But whoever's here maybe will answer your call or won't. And, so you have to keep that constant. And it would take 2 or 3 scripts, I think, whether TV or features, And if you have a little accolade like, whoa, I almost placed in a contest or something. Oh, great, rather than I'm just another writer here with a script. Please buy it,
Did you get any of those? You said you got them through an agent because you had a handler.
Yeah, agent and a manager. Well, at that time, just a manager.
What do you think about when you're creating a protagonist versus an antagonist?
I try to make a protagonist, you can veer on the side of maybe they're right at the edge of being bad, Bottom line, complex, that's the key, and it can't be just a one-note character. It have many different facets. And with those, then, you can almost help create the story out of that, because, this is that person's past, or, this is why they are feeling that way, or this is what they need, this is their desire. They're trying to find something, on their journey that they have to fulfill. And at the end, hopefully they do, maybe they won't, type of thing. But also somebody that we want to follow. So hopefully you look at the best characters in cinema and you're like, wow, I like them, I want to spend time and I want to champion their cause, type of thing. So, and maybe I could see a little bit of myself in that, in their journey as well.
Right. What about for the antagonist?
Well, the typical villain, can't be too cookie cutter either. Sometimes you see it's just like they're all bad. They have to be you have to also, in a way, understand, like Joker, you know, if you understand, not do you have to like them, but they just can't come from like bat out of hell crazy place and just they're all evil. It all stems from something. Is it their childhood? Is it the way something happened? You know, that helps to be like, oh, that's a more believable character, you know, to go up against. And when the antagonist pushes too much the protagonist, then they have to somehow act, you know, like, well, am I okay, it's go time, you know, and that they feed on each other.
Sure.
And sometimes, you know, the bad guy at the end has redemption, you know, and says, I was bad, you know, type of thing. Make it interesting, you know. Turns around. Doesn't mean that you forgive them, but, you know, on their last breath, I'm sorry, you know, or something. I don't know.
And does the good guy always have to win for the story to be fulfilling?
I don't think so. I mean, sometimes people, I know that's a way when someone would see it and maybe go, I wanted, you know, but, you know, life's not always that way. It's more in the gray area where, you know, there's temptation and I think those are the most interesting characters that it's not the white knight, you know, it's the, wow, that's, you know, that's different, you know, and I don't know, you can think of a commercial film where that's happened, I'm not sure.
Where the good guy doesn't win?
Yeah.
Yeah, commercial.
Commercial, I would think, would want that sort of Hollywood ending type thing, you know, but I think films more today, you know, like the bad guy the bad character can get away with it. And you're like, that's not right. Well, not everything is fair, you know.
Did you see Richard Jewell?
Oh, not yet. No.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I was going to bring that up. Well, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
Sure.
some of the characters, I don't want to...
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Some of the characters didn't have a happy ending, but...
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, that's based on a real life, you know, stories.
Right.
Parts of it aren't, I know.
Yeah.
But you're right, yeah, Hollywood ending, I don't know.
That's why I would say we go back to that point about the big movie. If you're writing that big $100 million film, do you think you could have where, the protagonist hero doesn't win? I mean, maybe if there's a sequel, but if you wrote the smaller film, you know, it'd be more, I'd say, unique, but you know what I mean? You could work, maybe you could stretch it out a bit more to make it more interesting, you know, and you would have the ability to do that in that world.
That's true, and I think art house audiences will be more forgiving if, if the quote unquote bad or good guy doesn't ride off into the sunset, whereas, yeah. Well,
you know, the noirs, the poor sap that ends up, you know, it's just, that's why one of my friends, I hate those movies. I'm like, yeah, you know, Sunset Boulevard, he's not going to end well for him. I'm sorry, but that's...
We know in the beginning, though, it's not going to end well.
Yeah, but that's, I like those movies because that's, the world's not always, you know, there's injustice and never gets, and you're like, that's, how do you know, so those are interesting ones, yeah.
What's the most amount of time you spent on a screenplay?
The most amount of time, boy, those are years ago. Not a lot of time now, but I think it would be my 5th spec, and only because I stopped on page 60. And that was because of a personal tragedy. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to go back to it because I felt guilty about not going through my grief. Someone passed away. And it took me probably 6 or 8 months of stopped on page 60 to go back and finish that first draft. So I had good momentum, and then it was just, you know, I was knocked out and just couldn't focus. But that experience worked its way into the script because there was loss in the screenplay as well. So it was really, really found its way in there in the successive, drafts after that. Not in the first, obviously, because it was only 60 pages, but it was, upon the other drafts, it really, so that I think that would have taken the longest time, but I don't, from writing assignments, because there's a schedule, I really like to get a script done, in obviously the time that the contract states, but just as in my own spec too, I don't want to work on it for years. I want to have something available and do successive drafts, and then have something to be like, okay, this is the one that at least that I can show people. So I would say, 3 pages a day is a feature in a month, easy. It's very doable. And people say, oh, I worked on a script for a year. And again, you can work on it for a long time without doing pages. You know what I mean? Because you're doing the research, you're doing, all these other things to get to that point. That could take time as well. You could spend months, that particular script, I did spend months of research before I even started, because it was a dream. So I had this little, like we were talking about, all I had was a little, like a little scene. And I was like, well, that's interesting. But what, like E.T., what about if someone was left behind? And so started building out characters and story, and it was a historical movie, so there had to be some research done. So, it's not always like, oh, write the script in a month. It could take, like the iceberg, there's a lot of work that has to, under the surface, that has to be done. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
When you finished the one screenplay where you stopped at the 60 pages
Yeah.
and something bad happened,
Yeah.
and then there was this guilt, how did you feel once you finished that screenplay? Because you said you took some of that emotion, you put it in.
Well, I felt it was almost that it was almost a mission, to finish it, because the person would have wanted me to do that. And so that helped me get through the guilt of like, well, how could I be writing this script, when this happened? And someone had passed away. So I thought, this person would want me to go back and do that. They wouldn't want me to, I don't say waste my time, but you know what I mean, on this thing. And so that helped motivate me to go, you're okay, there's no guilt in finishing this thing. So, yeah. Because you never know, when you're writing, your life can get in the way, and does, and it's this other thing that you do, and if it's your vocation, that you get paid to do it, you can't just toss it aside and say, oh, well, I mean, stuff happens in life too.
Sure.
But like we were talking about earlier, but using your personal experiences, you don't want to have to go through that stuff, but if you do, you tap into it, use it. It's real, it's authentic, it's authenticity. Actors love that kind of stuff, and so writers should as well.
The script that you're referring to, wasn't that the first screenplay that you sold?
It was, yeah. It was a World War II picture called I'll Remember April, and it had bumped around town for a number of years, and it finally got optioned and then made, so it was like 7 years from the time that I wrote the first draft to first day of photography. And not, like I say, not every project is that way, and some never get made, and you never, like we were talking about earlier, you never know the journey of a project. It could sit around for years on a shelf, and then someone discovers it, or it could sell tomorrow for big money. There's everything in between. So, yeah.
What did that experience teach you? Because didn't you have a day job, or you had another job during that time when you had to?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. During those 7 years, sure. And I also wrote other specs, and the whole gamut. What it taught me was that, if if you really believe in a script, don't give up with it. Now you have to see the writing on the wall, but this one had almost won the Nickel Fellowship. And I say almost. That year they picked the top 8 people, out of 3,500, to get the fellowship. And my script was in the top 20. So they actually called me and told me that. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. And so from that, I was able to get some people to read it and this and that. But the personal connection I had at the time with this company that was just starting was the way in. It wasn't from an agent. Is my own networking. So that's also important that everyone says, oh, I'm looking for an agent, and your own networking, I think, is almost more important because it's the face-to-face. I've got you. And, an agent, unless they're just starting, doesn't need a 25th client. In the way now some agencies are actually signing with the Writers Guild about everybody had to fire their agent. Who was in the guild, and some agencies are signing now to say, okay, we're going to follow the rules, but you should be networking. That's the most important thing is to have, because that wasn't sold by an agent. It was my own connection into that company. So that's what I learned as well.
Where were you networking? Like what? Like you don't have to name the place, but was it kind of an event?
It was my friend's friend who was in the business. So my friend had said, oh, my friend is an assistant to blah, blah, blah. And they were just starting a brand new company. They already had a company. Cut to a million years later, that assistant became president of that other company. And then he went off and left to have his own company. So you see how, it moves on. So every assistant is not going to be an assistant forever. They want to look at the Rolodex and find that amazing script to bring to their producer and say, look what I found. And you want that script to be yours. And you want that assistant to be somebody that you have a contact with because they're going to grow and move into producers and whatnot, And that assistant, because of that script, then as president of the company, hired me again and again. And then when he went off to his own, hired me again, So, that's how you build that. None of that was from an agent or a manager. Now, they're great to have, but I see people. I wrote my script. I got to get. It's like you should be out networking. You can't rely upon your career and give it to somebody else. You're the one thinking about it 24 hours a day.
Like networking where?
Around town, like there's functions all the time. ISA, International Screenwriting Association, has them. Final Draft has them. Stage 32 has them. Meetups, get-togethers, things like that. So just, or just be out. Like you're saying in Los Angeles, you never know who you're going to run into. And then there's no studio gate there that says they're not getting in. Seriously. My friend was chatting up someone, and they were the assistant to one of the biggest producers in town. Wow. Now, nothing happened, but then we were talking, blah, blah, blah. And okay, but they could have said, oh, that's an interesting story, because they're looking for that interesting story, right? And they want to be the one who brings it to the mucky muck and says, look what I found. Now, they have to read it first, and it has to go through hoops, but, it has to go through hurdles, but isn't that much better than, oh, I'm a struggling writer, and here's my stuff, and the agent or agency gets back to you 6 months later. Those can get you to different levels, absolutely necessary. But my point is, don't think that's the end-all, be-all. Those will come when you're ready. That's the thing. They'll come when you're ready. They won't come when you just finish your first screenplay and it's the most amazing thing, and then it already has bids on it and stuff like that, So don't stress about getting representation right away. That only comes, plus you have to be a workhorse. If an agent's going to take you on, or a manager, they want to see that you're working. Like, okay, you got this is good. We need to work and change. What else? You got another? And what else you working on? You have to be working, not just the one script. Throw it in the ring and go, am I done? No, you're not done. It's just the beginning.
Do you think desperation scares a lot of would-be deals away?
Yeah, they can sense a desperate writer a million miles away when you're like, you know, the best place to be is where you don't need it, where your life doesn't rest upon this 100 pages. You know, that's where it's, and plus the desperation can work into your writing too. You know, so no, it's hard. You know, desperation and fear and those are all things you gotta constantly keep in check.
When you are selling a screenplay, what are different types of deals you may encounter?
Well, there's the option agreement, you know, which is to shop the material. So they're not buying the script. I mean, there's provisions for purchase of it, but it's an option, which means they have the rights for, let's say, 3 to 6 months, and they can have you do work on it or possibly somebody else, but they're optioning the rights, and you have to be, not to say careful, but it's going to take it off the market, you know, obviously because they're paying you. Now, my first script sale, the spec, was optioned 3 times in a row. So, and I was doing all the rewrites, which is good. So they'd optioned it for a number of, for quite a while, 6 months at a time. And this allows them to find financing, and that may fall through, so they don't want to let the project go and also have their imprint on it. You know what I mean? So when it came time to execute the option, that means they had to purchase the script, and that was all in the contract. So, and then there's also the outright purchase of the screenplay, you know, and then you're usually given a chance to rewrite it, one draft and with notes, you know, with a polish, and then if it doesn't quite gel, then there's a provision for you to be let go and somebody else can be brought on. And then it's always, every time it's a step deal. So there's steps, you know, money to start. So when you read in the trades that the script sold for $1 million, they didn't hand over $1 million. It's only if the movie gets made does all the money get paid. So it all sounds great, but you know, you get money up front to start, and let's say you have to do the outline or treatment, you get money for that to start and turn in. So there's steps. Then rewrites, and so the first draft, you know, if you're doing an assignment, it's the same thing. Money to write the first draft, money when you turn it in. So it all goes by steps, and then there are provisions in each step for how long it takes to read it, and also how long that you're given to write it. I mean, after you write it, how long that they, you know, there's responsibilities on both sides. Your responsibility to write it, and the producer's responsibility to read it in a timely fashion. So meaning that, you know, they can't go away for 6 months and then suddenly get back to you. You know what I mean? So those are traditionally the type of working contracts.
What do you wish you'd known before starting down this screenwriting path?
I wish I had known how difficult it would be and how much of my life my choice, not complaining, would be given up for it. And wouldn't have it any other way. I could change a few things in the past, but that's only because of lack of experience and knowledge that you have now. You can only look back and say, oh, I would never have done that, or boy, did I blow that opportunity. You know, which in my book, I have those kind of stories and also disciplines about that. And, you know, you never, even whatever level you get to, you still make mistakes and you still go, well, I shouldn't have done that, but you hopefully make fewer of them. But just to realize how, I mean, out of film school, you know, the spec was crazy, money was going for specs, and we all thought we would just, you know, write a good spec and have a career, you know, and some did. But the amount of time it takes and how it can affect your life, you know, the pursuit of this, like I was thinking recently that I don't know if I would, today, if I was 11 years old, that I would go, you know, but see, I can't say because I only have hindsight, but I don't know if I would pursue it today. the business constantly evolves and changes. And I always say, wow, I wish I had worked in the 40s as a writer. It would have been, of course, like in the one movie, everybody's looking back at a different era with romanticized. Oh, the 40s weren't it. You should have been a writer in the 30s. The 30s, well, pretty much before then, movies weren't around. The 20s, okay, but, and then authors were the big thing, So we always look back, but the main thing I think was, which I tell writers today, this is going to be a long haul. You don't think it is for you. I know it. I know you don't. You're going to be different, and you could be, but it's going to be a long haul. It is for everybody. If you talk to anybody, and on your videos that you interview everybody has a different story of how they. And I don't like to say make it, because you never make it, in my opinion. We're always looking for our next job. We are, as writers. You're on a TV show, the show ends. You get residuals, great, but you got to get your next gig. You're always gigging. You're always looking for, unless you have your own production company and a funnel of money, then you can call all the shots. But you're always looking for your next job. So making it is getting your next job. And the first one, I always say, is the hardest, but the second one's pretty difficult too. And then your third, and then your fourth and fifth, and you're like, oh, wow. And they're not always in sequence, meaning they don't always come right after each other. There are periods that are dry, and not for lack of trying. It's just the nature of the beast, of the business. There'll be slow periods, and there'll be, oh my gosh, I've got so much work, I don't even know what to do. And everyone's journey is going to be different of how they break in. And so I was saying earlier about networking, extremely important about getting those relationships, and not just being, oh, you're my contact, I expect you to help me. Be a good contact. Help people out if you can. I've done it so many times when I see a job, they didn't know, I call, hey, you better call so-and-so, they got the job. Now they say, oh, it's because of you. I go, no, it's because of you, but I just happened to see that opportunity and tell you about it. And people remember that. They remember completely for years and years that, a friend of mine still to this day says, you got me 5 years on a TV show. I said, it wasn't me. He goes, no. And he knew the producer anyway, but he wasn't in the right time, right place. And all I did is bring it up at a dinner, and I said, well, what's going on? I said, well, he's actually looking for work. Really? Why don't you have him give me a call? It was that easy. Or it's that difficult. If you're not at that dinner, somebody else is going to get that job. Now, of course, he has the experience and all that stuff. We're not talking about that, but we're talking about the absolute weird, somebody leaves home and, at 9 o'clock, and if they left at 9:30, the bus wouldn't have hit them. We don't know about it. It's weird stuff going on, So, yeah.
Even if you were able to look back at age 11 or whenever it was, let's suppose you chose a different route, and that was to be, have your own carpet cleaning business, and you were the best carpet cleaner in all of your, the Tri-City area.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that you'd be standing in that same spot saying, I don't know, this was much harder than I thought? Do you think that for every profession somebody goes to, or any endeavor, that most people say the same thing? That it was much harder than I thought?
Yes, but I think the film business even more so, because I don't love the carpet cleaning business, but no, I don't know how 50,000 scripts a year are bouncing around it. You know what I mean? Everybody's trying to do the same thing, at least in LA. Many people are, and across the world everywhere, because everyone wants to be a filmmaker. Suddenly it's like, oh, everybody wants to be a filmmaker. Really? Oh, okay. Great. When I was 11, not everybody wanted to be a filmmaker. We had our little weird clique, of maybe 5 of us, but we were looked upon as, the film nerds, like film, you know what I mean? So it's the democratization of filmmaking because it's accessible to everybody. So we all can try it. That's absolutely great. But then you learn if you really have a passion for it, and you can, but then there's that other thing about getting a job. You can make your own movie, that's fantastic, but you have to, there's people who make movies and it's on Amazon and that's fine. And I don't know how many clicks it gets, if you want a wide range of something, it depends on how you set your goals. And a lot of times as the more you get knocked around in the business, many times your vision of what it was changes just by the fact of, you get older, and you start to be like, wow, okay, well, I wanted to hit for that, this, and you go, I'm okay with this, You know what I mean? Things change from what you originally thought at 11, but you got to keep that wide-eyed dreamer alive. Otherwise, it's all gone. So that 11-year-old kid is still in here somewhere, even though the jaded person is, but you got to keep that inside of you, because that what keeps you going. Like we were talking about going to a movie theater and the popcorn and the lights go down and you're like, take me, and you're like, the magic of cinema, the movies, and that's just what it just clicked with me. It wasn't carpet cleaning, it wasn't being a lawyer, that's what I want to do. And thank God I had a friend who got a camera, and maybe I would have, eventually I got one of my own, but that spark sort of clicked at the same time, So who knows? I mean, who's to say? And I had very supportive parents. That's also important, who said, go for it. We never got to do what we wanted, and it's going to be tough, but we'll be here to back you up. And that helps to have someone in your corner who believes in you, rather than, has the doubts and, whispers in your ear, oh, what do you think? You're going to sell something? Yeah, you're right. All right, I may as well give it up now. Get a refund for that software,
You think jaded is being, and I'm not saying you're jaded.
I'm not jaded. I was joking.
But there is a level that's needed, don't you think? To a self-protective layer?
Sure, absolutely. And it only comes from getting, like I say, knocked around. So the wide-eyed kid on one side and the boxer on the other going, I'm going to, because I've been down that road before. I've been in that situation. I was taken advantage of because I allowed it, because I wasn't smart enough. Not smart enough, but I didn't have the information I needed to say no. And no is an okay thing to say when you say, this isn't for me. You're dangling, carrots and riches, and I'm walking away. And I did to a certain extent with that spec. A company wanted to buy it outright and, to tell me to walk away. And, I needed the money at the time. Sure, it would have been, it's not, life-changing money. If it was, who's to say? But it was sort of like, yeah, okay, I can make that in, how many months doing my waiting job, but I wasn't going to walk away. I said, this doesn't feel right for me. I'm going to just take this back, and, someday somebody will find it, and they did. And it happens, and it doesn't happen, but there's no guarantees in this business. But the only guarantee, as I always say, is the mantra, is that if you stop writing, you're really guaranteed to have no chance of success. So you can only look in the mirror and complain to yourself if you're not doing the work. And you can blame Hollywood, you can blame your agents, you can blame, I'm a victim, blah, blah, blah. No, if you're not doing the work, then you only have yourself to blame. And the minute you stop doing the work, then you're out of the game. You're in the game, doesn't mean if you sold something or not. As long as you're writing screenplays and you've got a cohesive plan and you've got a schedule. I was reading something recently, a writer said, yeah, I do 3 scripts a year. I'm like, that's great. I did 3 last year, assignments, but, and tried to work on a spec, but okay. But if you have a plan of what you're gonna do, not just not have a plan and kind of wing it, time goes by so fast, You turn around and it's 5 years and you're like, oh, wow, what happened? Every year reevaluate. On my blog, I have a year-end checklist. It has 7 points and it says, reevaluate the last year. Don't beat yourself up, but learn from it. What did you excel in? What did you fail in? Where's your strengths and weaknesses, like we were talking about for writers? What do you have to improve on? Take it seriously, not just, oh, I'm gonna write a script, because it's you incorporated. There's no one out there pushing you, and we all decided to go down this journey. No one forced any of us, so you have to take responsibility for yourself, and also your career plans of what what you're going to do.
Do you write down all of some of the things that you thought you could improve on, or you just put that out there, like for 2019, the end?
Mm-hmm.
Did you put down specific things that you...
Oh, in the blog?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You did, okay. What were some of those things that you either could have done better or that you were really happy that you did?
Well, what projects did you work on? What did you have in your arsenal? Was it scripts? Was it TV pilots? Was it pitches? Was it outlines? In your folder of wherever it is in your computer, what's in your arsenal? What do you got? And what are you working on? And what's going to be finished first? And what do you think? You got to strategize. And what are you going to do with that script? What are your plans? I'm going to enter Nickel Fellowship. Great. I'm going to do this and that. Fantastic. I've got a contact at blah blah blah. So now you have a goal, and you set those goals. And okay, where did you fail? What did you make mistakes on? Okay, I sent this script out too early. They gave me horrendous notes. Or I'd failed. I didn't get in this festival or whatever. That's, again, festivals are a whole nother story. But you can't look at it as failure if you didn't win a festival. But I'm just saying, failures that you expected to happen in a positive manner that didn't. That's what I mean about that. Or outright failures. They rejected the script and said it was horrible. Things of that nature. And then with networking, who did I meet? Keep a log of that and follow up. New Year's is a great time to send out that email. Hey, always look for a reason. Not just a cold call email to somebody you may have met. It's like, hey, I just want to wish you Happy New Year. I hope your project's doing well. I happen to be working on this and blah, blah, blah. Things like that of that nature. Cards are old school, but they're a great way. Again, if you get that card, I was told that the assistants put the handwritten cards on top of the mail. So when the mail comes in, the handwritten stuff's on top. So whose card is going to be there? Hey, Happy New Year. And you're like, hey, remember that Mark guy?
And
there he is.
There he is.
Yeah, that's my ride.
I know. It's taking you to the studio.
Exactly.
Right now.
So you remember that Mark guy? Yeah, it puts you back on the radar, and it's old school. Email's like so cold, and so various things like that, where you look over the past year and analyze it honestly, and then what are you going to do this year? What do you have plans? I mean, the year goes by fast, so what are you doing? Instead of like, well, I set up a schedule. I want to finish the script by March 1st, and damn it if I'm not going to meet that. And I only have to do 2 pages a day. Great, rain or shine. Just like talking about I'm studying martial arts, rain or shine. My Sifu says, "Did you study today?" I said, "Yes." Okay, and boy, talk about procrastination. It's like, yeah, it's late, last night I did my training and I didn't want to, but it becomes ingrained where then you do want to, and then when you see results of that, you want to even more, because nothing's done if you don't do it. I mean, it sounds so simple, but same way with writing, so by March 1st, I don't want to hear somebody who committed to that, made a self-commitment to themselves, which is the worst thing for me to break, a commitment to myself, because I don't like to do it to others, but to yourself. And and unless something terrible comes up, right? But you finish it by March, you're like, damn, I can hit a deadline, And I'm not expecting it to be amazing, but I got a first draft done. And now what are you going to do with it? I'm going to go through the thing, and you know what I mean? So it's just being aware of just not like treating it like a business almost, of like, we have to have plans for this thing that's you, the screenwriter, to get you to these different levels. So,
would you say that you are a working screenwriter 7 days a week in terms of you work on your career in one fashion or
something?
Another?
I say screenwriters don't get weekends off, and this weekend will be exactly the case, because today, before I came, I got notes again from a polish of a script I've been, I wrote on assignment, and I want to turn it around as fast as possible because I want the thing made. And so, and there's sometimes, but something in my life always has to do with screenwriting. Something always is something. You can't just, there are times when I can be away from it, but then I start getting antsy, because I like to work and I like to create. So it's a big part, which is the way I've planned it. I want it to be a big part of what I do, so yeah.
Mark, you added off camera some interesting tidbit about writers that you were maybe surprised by.
Yeah, sometimes when I consult, I find that a writer is not able to, upon a second read, execute those notes, to make the draft like that much better, or say, well, this part wasn't working, and then it comes back and it's still not working, and that's going to be a problem in one's career if you can't execute notes, if you want to stay on. The idea is to stay on a project and not get fired, not just sell a script, because it's going to look bad if they take you off the project. And you might share credit, but you'll be known as like, you probably might not work with that producer again because you couldn't execute the notes. You want to be the only person on that, and it happens. There are other people that come in, and I've been on the other side where, I was hired to rewrite a script because the writer was given many chances to do notes and it just wasn't working. And so traditionally what they do, they tend to say, thank you very much, but we got to get somebody in here because we're not going to trash the project. We're still going to make it, but it's not moving where we need it to move, So I think that's very important, is to be able to rewrite the script. And I think that comes from a place of knowing structure, knowing all the elements that it takes to write a screenplay. And many times, like with a script, I had to dismantle it to its essence and then start again. Like tear the house down, but leave the bathroom. We're like, okay, but it's still going to be a house, and we still want it to be, Mediterranean style, with 8 bedrooms. You're like, got it, but all this other stuff is not working. And like I was telling you off camera about, I just finished a polish, and then I got notes this morning. And it's a polish, so it's going through and refining, stuff. It's not like dismantling, it's switching things around, and it's maybe, hopefully, 3 or 4 days of work, maybe 5. But it's not a huge, you want to get to that point. If you do a polish, then you're like, oh, okay, most of it's settled, but this has to be, raised in this scene. It's too subtle, things like that. Or in this case, for reasons of production. So you go back through and you polish it because, we want to cut down the number of scenes. We want to streamline this aspect, things like that. But you have to be able to do that on your own screenplay, if you want to stay on the project. Executing notes is extremely important.
Do you think that the reason screenwriters or maybe new screenwriters aren't successful at that is a resistance, or they don't understand it and they're not trying to be difficult? They just can't see outside of their own idea for a story?
I think it's more that than resistance. Could be a little resistance because my words, my vision, and then you quickly learn like, well, it started to be your words and vision, and now it's a rewrite, and hopefully a lot of it stays, but it's a collaborative art form, and you want to be a team player to, work once, like I say, with my producer and directors I work with, once the script is now in the development process, my job is to help get it made, and then there are things that, like I say before, you fight for if you really believe in a change, and you'll talk respectfully and maturely and say, because you're talking to other creative people who aren't out to like make a bad movie per se. Sometimes it happens, but you say, well, I don't think this will really work because of this reason. And as long as you defend it, with concrete evidence, and then you can convince to keep it unchanged. But you also have to be open And more times than not, thank goodness there's a producer to guide it, because, you know, some of my choices are like, oh, I get why you're doing that. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. Yeah, that actually, that's better. So it's not about who thought of what, because you're all in it together. You know, you put the ego aside, and it becomes like, let's just all work together to get the movie made. You know, the best version possible. But back to your point about, I do think it's just lack of experience, possibly, where someone has never received notes, maybe. They never had a critique on their script, so they wouldn't know how to go back in and make those changes. So that rewriting is a good way, rewriting your bad scripts, rewriting your good ones is a good way to gain that experience over multiple drafts and, you know, multiple screenplays, to be like, oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. But then you'll get into a situation where many producers are vague, you know what I mean? And so there's no school to go to where a producer, you know, like I said before, each screenplay is a different experience out of the gate. Different producer, different working experience. And one producer I worked with, I tried to capture what he was saying, and I felt bad if I went, oh, you know, I don't quite understand, because then it makes me look like, what do you mean you don't understand? We hired, and then I start feeling like, oh, well, you know, but it was all over, bouncing all over the map, big, broad ideas that were changed on the fly. Whoa. Did we go with this one or the other one? You know, so you have to be ready for that, you know. So, yeah, there's all sorts of situations, but execution of the notes, I always have to say, is extremely important.
Yeah, that was my next question. That you already went there, but that was, what if it's, not to let the writer off the hook, but
sure,
the notes that are being given are not clear, and so then the writer is fighting against that, or not even fighting, but just trying to understand.
Sometimes you'll have maybe the assistant you can go off to, and, you know, because you don't want to look like you don't know what you're doing, you know, and talk to them, and they'll be more than happy to be, oh, you know, I'm speaking on behalf of whatever. But I've been lucky that people I've worked with are like razor sharp, you know, like, okay, page 48, you know, and I love those kind of notes. I don't like the broad stroke notes, because it leaves it up to you, and then you go this way with it, and they're like, I wanted you to paint this way with a twist. You're like, okay, so, you know, and then it gets bogged down in development hell, and no one's ever going to say that it's their fault. You know, you're not working, you know, it's not working. And you just, oh, okay, all right. So.
Well, of the SAG screeners that you saw, or of some of the screeners or the films that you saw for 2019, what was the best script? What was the best writing of all of the films?
Well, I saw, but it's funny, because it's a script, you know, I look at, the scripts are available, so when you see the movie, I always look at the screenplay. And like Jojo Rabbit was literally on the page. And some scripts you read, because you don't know what draft you're getting, if it's a production draft or it was the final, you know what I mean? And it was like, oh, that's, because I always love to do that from years back, is to see a movie. You don't want to read the script before, because it will ruin it. See the movie and then go back to see, like, oh, how would I have written that scene? And there's a particular scene, I won't say it in there, and I was like, and I looked, and it was exactly, you know, we're not showing what we're not showing, and it was written on the page, and I was like, wow, that's you know, that's a good thing for writers to do as well, you know, and to read. You have to read all the time, you know, screenplays, and I always say, be careful of the ones in award season, because they're in a protected bubble, so they're not specs, so you can get away with a lot more, because, you know, it is in development, you know what I'm saying, than your spec. I'm saying with regards to format and things like that, because you can do what you want, because we're on this protected bubble now. It's not a spec where I don't know you. I can only know you from what's on this page, you know what I mean? So I see some writers want to try to emulate certain styles, you know what I mean? But I just say, be careful, because those are either the directors writing the script for the screen, and can put a lot more things in the script than let's say, maybe a spec would or should.
What about dialogue of the 2019 contenders that you watched? Who had the best dialogue? And what was so
It's
great?
funny, Parasite, was talking about don't be afraid of the 1.5 inch, subtitles. And I've always loved foreign films, so I have no problem with subtitles. Yeah, they all, Once Upon a Time, the dialogue, was really good. Tarantino. But they're all there for a reason, these movies, you know what I mean? There's some that didn't get nominated, and it was the snub, and, but we all should champion a year of great filmmaking, rather than, who didn't get the award or who wasn't nominated. We have such a wide choice of stories and things now to it's gotten so much better because everybody's A game, the game goes up, you know what I mean? And you can see like, well, that's not, and who benefits but the filmmakers and also the viewers,
I really like Bruce Dern's dialogue in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That was really funny.
That was supposed to be Burt Reynolds to play that part. Yeah, he passed away, unfortunately. So yeah, it's just interesting how that would have made a different type of character. I don't know, because Bruce Dern can kind of disappear into a character, and Burt was a great actor, I think, but he's still Burt Reynolds.
Sure.
So how do you get around for that? And the last movie that he was in, I saw was what was it called? It was his last film before he passed away. It was great. He played a aging film star who goes to a film festival. I think it's called The Last Movie Star.
Okay.
Possibly, yeah.
Does a screenwriter have to live in Los Angeles?
Preferably no, but it helps, tremendously to live in Los Angeles, to be around the business. There's no doubt about it. Like we were talking about earlier, you could be out anywhere and run into somebody. Not that it's your choice of networking, but you're around it. There's so many. Any night there's a screening. There's Academy screenings. There's Writers Guild special things where you can meet the filmmaker, and American Cinematheque has it all the time. The filmmaker's there. You can ask questions, to learn and study. And you don't get that in smaller places or places that aren't Hollywood, And now you can work it, but let's say you get a meeting. You're going to have to fly in, and that meeting could end up being just a general meeting that, you drive to Pasadena for, 28 miles, but you're going to fly across the country. And it could end up, and you want to maybe schedule a few of them, but you know what I mean? It's sort of, it's not impossible. So no one should say, well, I don't live in Hollywood, I won't be a screenwriter. A lot of people live outside of Hollywood, but you're going to have to throw your stuff into the ring and come out for meetings and have that expense, be able to get off from work, these type of things. And traditionally, I don't know what town size that somebody might be in, but you're not running in those circles where somebody says, hey, come to this party, or I got this screening, to meet people, to put it out there. Or the festivals that are here all the time, you can enter your film obviously from elsewhere, but to go to them and network, and stuff like that. So it's not impossible, but there's so much here if you work it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
What about not knowing temperament is the wrong word, sort of having a pulse on, I know it's such a cliche term, having a pulse on the industry, but really there is a different way of working in LA, and just because somebody says, great, we'll be in touch, it doesn't mean that, where it might mean that more in the Midwest, where people might be more apt to keep their word.
Or I'll read your screenplay.
Okay, right, so kind of
6 months later.
And knowing that actually 2 years later they could actually call you, so you don't want to get mad and shoot an email and say, how dare
Yeah,
so there is like this different protocol here, and if you don't live here and you're around different surroundings where things may mean what they mean.
Right, then you hold them to a higher standard, which they don't. They go, what did you mean you believe me? Well, I believe a person of their word. You expect me to be that way? Well, Forget it, Jake. It's Hollywood, you know.
Well, sometimes they keep their word. It's just several years later.
Yes, it just takes longer, of course. Yeah.
And so the natural inclination would be to be hurt or angry, but really, if you just kept that door open, it could actually happen.
Yes. Yeah, you don't want to burn any bridge ever.
Right.
Yeah.
But maybe people don't understand that there is like a different way.
Yeah, they'll
things are done.
learn quickly if they come out here, you know, and you know, go, wow, I have to change my, you know, the way I deal with people. Well, I wouldn't change myself. I would still be that person who you are. I don't, you know, drop to that. But it would be frustrating when no one else, like you were saying, is plays that way. They play with their own rules.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or you could be someone you wouldn't hear from someone for a very long time, and then the next thing you know, now you're always hearing from them.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Feast or famine. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens.
So from just visiting here, I don't think you would get that.
No, you wouldn't. Just to come out for a meeting, you'd be wined and dined, or maybe not. Maybe it's just a general meeting. You know, sometimes a meeting's just a meeting.
Get a soda.
Yeah,
If you're lucky.
cigar's just a cigar. So, people online, I got a meeting, you know, blah, 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 and they boast about, okay, that's great. But what happens when I've been to a million general meetings myself, and they just want to meet you and say, glad to meet you. And that's great, but it doesn't mean, you know, I used to love to have, oh my God, I got a meeting, you know, because the potentiality of the whole thing, you know, and then you learn some people's job is just to take a meeting. They want to have a face with a name, and that's it. And maybe if you got a product and you can show them a script, it's something great, but it doesn't mean they're going to buy it tomorrow. But you build on that. You know, you build over a number of years, you know.
So then being here, it's not just the cost of going to a meeting and getting off work and being close by. It's also knowing how things work and what a word really means.
Being in a way in front of them more than out somewhere where, you know what I mean, you could potentially, I don't know, you know, if I disappear, you're off my radar. I mean, there's still email, yes, but I'm saying that face to face, like, and then what about the last minute meeting that came up? You're not going to be able to get a plane flight, red eye to fly out, you know what I mean? So if things bob and switch, you can tomorrow go, oh my God, I can go to Warner Brothers. It just opened up, or you know what I mean? So, you know, but don't leave your family and your job and say, I'm all in, you know, because it's going to be rough. You know, unless there's a guaranteed, like they're flying you out, you know, type of thing. You know, it's a done deal. They're buying the script, you know. But I just think living here puts you around it all the time. If that's if that's what you want to do, you know.
What about jinxing something by saying, "Guess what? I got this meeting," or "Guess what? I got this."
Oh, of course, all the
audition."
time. That's why I have a blog article about, you know, keep your. Like in poker, you know, don't spread it out there, because many times it's going to bomb, and then what do you know, it's going to look like, yeah, you know, you're boasting about this meeting, it could be it, and you're let down in front of everybody else, you know, your failures, which is fine, but you don't want to present that too much. You know, it's a private thing. You just say, yeah, I'm working on it. You know, I got some meetings and it looks good, you know, because a lot of energy is spent. And I understand the anticipation, the excitement of it, you know, you want to share that, but it's also a big fall, you know, they're going to make the movie. Well, not until the check clears. You know, I've been to many times, and the head of production goes, oh, we'll be shooting in, you know, 6 weeks, and it's 7 weeks, what's going on, you know? If I told everybody, you know, oh, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to do that, you know, be a big fall, you know. So it's a lot easier to blow, just to be sort of even keel, not these too hard to over the long haul to have these big ups and downs. It's just the middle area is the best place to be.
What's the best screenplay you've ever read?
Oof. I've read quite a few good ones. Actually, I'm not going to name his name, but a close friend of mine, I read his script, and it was like I was seeing the movie. I mean, no, I'm not kidding. I saw the movie. I mean, sometimes you read a script and you have to conjure up. This was, I was seeing the movie on the page, which you hear and you don't see a lot or read a lot, and it's one to be studied by me as well, because it was like, wow, he worked a long time on it as well. But that was one recently that I read, was just, off the charts type of thing. And you try and strive to be, to try to get to that point, obviously. And that's what rewriting does, to try to whittle it down to its most effective way of what you're trying to do, trying to present your story.
How many people had seen his script, had read it to get it to that stage?
Well, it was a spec, but it was, it hadn't been made, but it was a professional. This is from a professional, screenwriter. So it still to this day hasn't been made, but doesn't mean, it's just sometimes it happens.
Were you the only person to look at it? Oh,
No. I'd gotten a copy later. Oh. I had no input on it or anything, but I got a copy to read, and I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, whoa,
Do you know how many eyeballs saw the?
No, it had been around to like real actors, considering to be in it type of thing, and I can see why.
Wow.
Because of how good it was,
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how long did it take for him to write it?
That I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure. But I know that wasn't the first draft. Back to our point about, first drafts, oh my God. Like, yeah, great starting point,
Did he outline?
I'm sure he did, because he had told me on his recent film, a big studio picture, he had outlined, you have to, but it was like 50-page outline. So, imagine that when people are like, I don't want to outline, try 50 pages.
Wow.
We're talking, because it needs to be that before you even get to, stuff. So by that, you've worked out, it's just now write the script. Pleasurable experience,
So that's almost like
half.
2 minutes. Like, I'm trying to think of how does that break down time-wise?
Yeah, I don't know. You're right. 2 minutes a
page.
page or something, or yeah. But it may not be, because you never. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
This could be 2 minutes of screen time. Who knows?
That's true. Why would a writer stop writing?
Writer would stop writing when they have nothing else to say, maybe, or they would stop writing because they haven't achieved a level where they thought they would be, maybe. I'm giving up. I didn't sell an A-list script. I'm going to go sell carpets, carpet cleaning, something, whatever job it is. You would hope that a writer would, would stay in the game, and because we got, like officer and gentleman, I got nowhere else to go. I got nothing else I want to do. I need to tell stories. I'm a storyteller, and it's tragic when you hear people, writers, give up. And I understand, because everybody has their limits, and they, it's like, it could be not giving up, let's say pursuing it full time, but maybe dabbling on the side, and then that takes longer, and sure, life can get in the way, and then, it falls along the wayside, and maybe wasn't as interesting of a pursuit as the writer thought it was, and because it went up against that test, the difficulty test. And, that's always, like I say, how badly do you want it? Rejection, criticism, failure, that's usually the litmus test of how bad you want to be in this, because we're all going to experience that even after you make it. If you start working, you're going to be fired, and stuff. So, yeah, they're all fear too. Maybe I'll never, achieve what I thought I would, but I say the longer you're in it, that kind of changes too, just by its nature of being in this, at least for me, how you look at things, So it could be a number of reasons why someone quits, but it's always a sad day for me to hear that, going, one of our, brethren or sisters stopped, maybe it would just be around that next corner. Maybe it's that next script, But that's also the chasing the dragon, you know, like, well, not this one, and we all have to. Maybe it's the next one. Maybe it's the one after that. And then, you know what I mean? So everybody has to have their own self-reflection about, you know, how long you're going to give this. If, you know, like I say, I never put an expiration date on my screenwriting dream. So I didn't say, well, by this date I have to have, you know, and thank goodness stuff worked out a bit, you know. But I don't know if I was doing it for 10, 15 years and there was no forward movement, what I would think about it, you know. So I think it's a personal thing. Every writer has to ask themselves.
So when you started writing, you had one mindset for it, and now you've gone into something that's just maybe a little more relaxed realistic. Okay.
Yeah.
Not relaxed about the work, by the way, but just
No.
about certain goals and in terms of
Yeah, sure.
It has to be, you know, I have to be here by this point kind of thing.
Yeah. Or what you want to do. Don't you want to direct? It's like, you know, I'd rather produce and write. You know, directing, there's a lot of directors, you know, and having done it in film school, yeah, but I have no project to show someone. It's like, oh, you're the one over this person. In fact, I would probably, on a project, step aside and let a director who I would pick direct the movie. That's more of a producer's thing, you know. So I don't know. It changes, you know. Out of film school, I kind of always wanted to be a writer. But then the longer you're in the business, you go, writers get kicked around a lot, stuff gets changed a lot, and you're always at the mercy of someone else hiring you. But if you're a producer writer, or you move into producing where you say, this is my project, you don't get it. I'm going to put the elements together, you know, and now I'm a producer, you know, type of thing. So things can change.
Since our last interview, which was 2017, I believe around the holidays,
yeah.
2017, have you changed your mind about any of the writing process? Maybe you were in one camp where you said, I'm not going to do it this way, or I only do it this way, and then now, several years later, you've changed where you've loosened up on that, or you've completely, anything about the writing process that has changed for you, where you were very dogmatic about something and then...
I don't know, I think the dogma's still there. But I think the process of being, I wanted to get back to more, like I can remember the days when ideas would just pop up, you know, and this and that. And I would find an idea that I would be so passionate about that I would see it, you know. And, you know, when you're working on assignments, it's kind of different. I mean, you have to do that, but it's you know, I like, what I'm trying to say is I want to get back into more of that spec stuff for me. If it sells or not, whatever, you know. I've got other spec ideas that are pretty decent shape. They've been, you know, I pitched them and they've been around and stuff, but to maybe take one and expand it into something else instead of a TV pilot, make it a feature, or maybe write a book of it, you know, type of thing. So one thing I would say is I'm opening my mind more to different creative possibilities than just the straight and narrow type. So yeah, in that way. But the way that I work, no. You know, I'm open to suggestion, but so far, you know, it seems to work, you know, for what I'm doing. So yeah, but I'm always open to, you know, you always have to be, you know, like water flows, you know, so it's like.
Is that part of the Tai Chi? You think either the Tai Chi changed that, or you already changed and then you wanted to do the Tai Chi because it's kind of about the flow of energy and different things?
Yeah, I think that's going to help me more on this next plateau, you know, in studying certain philosophies to try to, you know, have them dictate toward writing in a way, you know, trying to make them sort of similar, or it's life, you know. I mean, these kind of philosophies are for life too as well, you know, discipline, right, you know, patience, things like that.
And with Tai Chi, it's not if you hit back, it's you shift your energy.
Yeah, it's a flow, You know what I mean? So it's trying to flow through life. That's what I'm trying to do. And, you know, when you come up against these hurdles with screenwriting, not to take them as the end all be all, your life's over type of thing. You know, and I say that for beginning writers as well, you know, especially because you're going to hit a lot of knocks that you're going to want to give up. You're going to say, well, I'm not selling anything and nobody's reading my stuff, or how do I get to do that? And you find a way. You find that one move that works, you know, but.
Yeah, I saw a documentary came out, I think 2019, about Miles Davis's career, and he reinvented himself so many times.
Yeah.
And there were times when he wanted to give up, or
Sure.
different things happened with his health. But yeah, he was always kind of reinventing himself.
Because you know, he spanned so much time that you can't keep doing the stuff back, you know, that you were doing in the 60s. You know, you have to evolve and change, you know. And so, yeah, I believe in that too. You have to, as you grow as a person, you know, so too you have to grow as a screenwriter. You know what I mean? And it's storytelling, so.
Right, so he would infuse different things. I think he did like sort of he had a more Latin percussion phase that he put into his music, and different things with different costumes, different looks, and it really helped keep this career going.
Yeah, and it keeps you fresh. That's the key, you know. And you don't look at it as like, this thing, you know, that I have to do. You come back to it from that 11-year-old kid that was like, oh, this thing that I love to do, that I'm blessed to do, that I'm blessed to get paid to do. You know, I was blessed to do it anyway, but get paid is even better, you know, so, yeah.